Two girls were sitting in the carriage. One of them asked the other where she thought they were going, but she only replied that she did not know. The carriage was surrounded by many men. They walked not far from her. One girl told the other to cover up as her clothes started falling off her. Suddenly sounds rang out above. The men shuddered and looked up at the sky. The girls also looked up. One of them immediately thought to herself that it was a dragon. She thinks the roar is a sign that the beast feels sorry for them. Tokyo, Sujinami District. Someone was shouting at another person to come forward and attack. An old man with a katana in his hand was telling a young man that if he managed to kill him, he would give him everything he had. The young guy opposite said that if he would give everything, then it sounds pretty good. Two men stand in front of each other and smile. He also held a katana in his hand. Getting into position, he looked to the side. The old man also turned around. And at that moment he was attacked. But the man was able to dodge in time, but the guy kept attacking. He was telling the other that that obnoxious youth was really going to stab him in the throat. The latter, making a vile face, said that the master had taught him not to spare anyone in a serious battle, even his parents. Of course, all his techniques are designed to kill in one hit. If he is going to kill his opponent, then he has no choice but to exchange sword blows. That's why it's dangerous. The guy asked where in Japan he was going to use such a technique at all. At his cry, the crows sitting in the trees scattered to the sides. A little later, the girl put eggs and bacon on the table, saying that the breakfast of these two was already getting cold. Holding a tray with food on it recently, she said that the two of them must have had a lot of fun since they lost track of time. The guy was straightening his tie and wailing that it couldn't be fun with this old man, and she had to stop making him laugh. The girl asked what they were doing in that case. When asked by the girl, the guy said that they were busy killing each other. The angry girl said that she had had enough of these jokes. The old man who was watching this winked and said to Asuka, "Is it fun for her to play married couple?" She asked her grandfather to stop because they don't have such a relationship with Ryoma. But he seemed to get carried away with this question and kept reading that she kept saying it. But isn't she the one who comes here every day and makes them breakfast? Suddenly, he turned to the young man, shouting that he would not tell him that he had a competitor in love affairs. If he wants to protect something, then he shouldn't show a drop of pity for his opponent. Suddenly, the guy picked up on his grandfather's mood and told the old man that he understood everything. At that moment, the old man was trying to hit the plate with a stick, telling him not to be so smug. He put his plate away in time. Because of this, the blow landed on the table, which instantly acquired cracks. He told the old man to underestimate him. It seems that the girl's last thread of patience has snapped. She said she would go to school first. A little later at school, a girl ran up to Remo and asked him if he was thinking about joining a karate club. He was sweetly refusing the girl, putting his hand forward. They will always welcome him and can also wait, so he should think about it again. Classmates sitting on the sidelines saw that Remo was being recruited again. A classmate reasoned that Ryoma was almost 2 meters tall and his body was pumped up. In addition to the karate club, he could join another club, for example, judo. If it had been, he would have agreed for sure. At that moment, he was thinking of something else entirely. He remembered his grandfather's words that if he was going to kill his opponent, then he had no choice but to exchange sword blows. All his techniques are needed to kill in one hit. Finally left alone, he climbed onto the roof of the school. Today, as usual, it turned out to be Kairoben. Asuka keeps doing completely unnecessary things. It's not like he likes to eat alone. It is impossible for him to join the club. If he gets carried away unexpectedly, he might kill someone. Killing a guy who doesn't want to kill you is somehow not particularly pleasant. And I don't want to go to prison either. Suddenly, a kind of magic circle and a large bright glow appeared around him. The next moment, the guy was already sitting, surrounded by some men. The man standing in the middle looked like a magician. He is sure that today's appeal turned out to be successful. One of the knights confirmed this, saying that he has developed muscles, but they should not judge a book by its cover. The magician said that the knight was also right to some extent. He needs to put a curse on him as soon as possible. The guy finally turned to the others. He didn't understand what was going on. It wasn't like his school. He felt a strong killing intent from the knights. He should try to take advantage of the element of surprise. He recalled his grandfather's words that if he wanted to protect something, then he should not dare to show even a drop of pity for his opponent. The guy finally got to his feet, picked up his bento and smiling turned to the others, asking if they wanted to eat this cute food in the form of animals together. And at that moment, the guy, waving his hand, struck one in the face. The knight fell and the guy continued to carry punches in the same spirit. He grabbed his sword. Swinging, he threw it directly at another soldier, but he managed to dodge. At that moment, when the soldier was not protected, he took off from his place and flew at him. Swinging, just like before, he hit his hand in the face. The third knight himself went to the guy. but in the end he fell on another, knocking down both himself and a friend. The guy went to the next one, removing everyone from his path one by one. The magician was clearly worried. He began to chant some kind of spell, begging the spirits for help. The guy concentrated on the magician. It was clearly not good. The last soldier shouted at the young man as the magician continued to cast the spell. And finally, having finished it, he raised his staff up. Summoning a storm bolt in the form of a directional magic strike, he saw that some person was hooked and thought it was a conscript. Well, when the smoke slowly settled, he realized that he had hit the last knight that could protect him now. It dawned on him that the young man had used his subordinate as a shield. And at that moment, the summoner himself appeared at his side. With one precise punch to the stomach, it hit him right in the right lung. The young man was standing over him. He asked the old man where he was. He started talking, but he didn't explain it so clearly, only after. He said it was the west of the central continent, the royal palace, the Otomai Empire. The guy clearly didn't understand why he was here. That's because the magician summoned him. Did this man, in order to avoid magic, attack the magician's lung so that he could not conjure? But how could he know about it, because there shouldn't be magic in his world? Then the guy decided to ask him the next question. He asked if he could return to his world. The magician felt the pressure. Was it really his intention to kill, like a warrior? He thought that if he could subdue him, then taking over the entire continent would no longer be just a dream. But what should he do? Should he tell the guy that he can return to his world, but then he'll make him give it back? But if he tells him the truth, he will kill. He, whom other countries call the brain of Otomai out of horror, cannot die here like this. He should stall for time until the guards notice that something is wrong. The guy felt his pulse. He smiled, asking what the magician was thinking about now that his heartbeat was racing. Is it really about the fact that he has no way to get it back? Based on what he knows, he doesn't have a way to get it back. He realized that the young man opposite had seen him through. But his lung is recovering. If he could somehow distract him, he could kill him. Can they really summon anyone, but they can't send them back? This means that they have no intention of returning the conscripts alive. Then why did they call him here? The magician replied that it was because they were from another world and had a high absorption power. In this world, when you kill someone, you can absorb their power. At that moment, the magician decided that this was his chance and began to recite his spell again. The guy hit the exact spot again. He was called to another world. The good news is that clearly no one on Earth would call this self-defense. A little later in the castle walls, the girl was screaming at the top of her voice, asking what it all meant. Something had definitely happened to her grandfather. 2 hours have passed since the beginning of the ceremony. The guards argued that the laws forbid anyone to interfere in the process. One of the knights asked Syria to calm down. She turned around with tear-stained eyes, saying how she could calm down if Grandpa failed at least once, then there would be trouble. The girl asked Rolf for forgiveness. She seemed so ridiculous to him. The man, closing his eyes, denied it. Only his irreverence is visible here. He knows that her relationship with Geiatsu is sealed with blood, so her excitement is understandable. She said that even top-level wizards make mistakes. At that moment, she began to cast a spell. The knight she was talking to screamed, asking everyone to step back. The man did not understand why she used fire against the steel door. That alone won't even move the big door. At that moment, the girl used a freezing spell. The huge metal door instantly crumbled into small pieces. The knights did not understand how such a thing could happen to a steel door. The senior knight realized that she had heated it and then frozen it. She used a sudden temperature change to destroy the door. The girl moved forward with Rolf. She was telling him that now they had to hurry up and go inside. She wanted to invite everyone to explore the place, but saw the defeated knights around her. One noticed the magician and called the chief. A young girl screamed for her grandfather. Another survivor was also found, but he was also in obviously poor condition. The only thing he could mumble was that there was a monster here. Rolf was screaming that they had to save him. They need to take him to the infirmary right away. The soldiers shouted that they needed to bring a stretcher right away. The wounded soldier was carried to the other side. He kept trying to say something, but he was told not to talk yet. This is a story about a man who came from another world and met 2 servants. In the west of the central continent, where the era of sword and magic prevails, and he began his journey to become the supreme ruler and a great hero. He will meet many people in the future. The wounded masked knight smiled maliciously. The girl was thinking about a lot of things. What kind of monster could kill the grandfather of the leader of the royal magicians herself? And where did he go? The series recalled that the autopsy showed that all these people were killed by someone with their bare hands. A little later, the fact that they were killed with their bare hands surprised even the commander-in-chief. Is it really possible that someone could kill all these soldiers with their own hands, and it is simply impossible for Geiatsu? But they found bruises in the shape of fingers. and some also had the occipital parts of their skulls crushed. The only survivor said it was a monster. He meant that the creature summoned from another world was a monster, not a human, but it definitely can't be. Only a conscripted person should be weak at first, so he can only hope to ask the surviving soldier about it later. Suddenly, a knight burst in, shouting at Rolfa that he needed to come to the infirmary immediately. At this time, in another part of the castle, a fire raged in the room. A young guy was walking in the gardens. From the side, he heard screams that there was a fire somewhere. He turned around. Behind one of the towers, there was a huge amount of smoke. People around asked for water. They ran out of the castle walls faster and faster, while the young guy was walking straight there. Come closer, he began to cast a spell to summon the spirits. He invoked the Aqua Storm spell. A shape formed out of the water and headed towards the fire. He was hailed from the side, calling Orlando. It was Syria and Rolf. The girl ran up to him, loudly asking what had happened here. She asked me to explain everything to her right now. The guy said he just put out the fire, but she could figure that out for herself. How could he explain it if he had just come here himself? She turned to him, saying that before the fire started, a wounded soldier was brought here. Did he know anything about it? They entered the burned-out room. An elderly man with glasses entered the room from behind her. He called the series. He said that the soldier had arrived at the infirmary. This man was the Imperial Dr. Ronbelt. He drank something from the bottle, saying that it was very dangerous. And Aaron was killed too. Remembering the moment when the soldiers carried out the only survivor of that incident, they shouted at him to hold on. He needs to try not to lose consciousness, because if he falls asleep now, he may never wake up. They brought him to the doctor. They knocked on the door and shouted that it was urgent. The doctor then saw the wounded warrior. He turned to the arena, saying that they had an urgent matter here and he wanted to leave everything in his hands. The young Aaron was a doctor's assistant. The knight was loaded in front of him and the doctor left the room. Aaron called his father, asking him to wait, but he slammed the door, leaving everything to his son. One of the knights turned around and said that the doctor was drunk again. He no longer knew what to say about him. The second doctor said that everything was fine. Despite such a young age, Dr. Aaron is quite famous. First, they need to take off his armor. At that moment, the throat of one of the soldiers was pierced by a sword, and he fell dead right in front of the others. The girl turned around in horror, and her body also dropped dead. Aaron opened the door and started calling for help, but was immediately grabbed by the neck and pinned to the floor. He begged me to leave him alone. But the main character was apologizing, because before leaving, he would like to ask him one question. Aaron asked what he needed. The guy in front of him was wondering how he could get out of this place. Aaron kept stuttering and asking who he was and why he killed people. The guy squeezed someone else's throat harder with his hands, apologized for that, but couldn't he just answer his question? The guy said that he just needs to keep walking along the path to the right, and as soon as he passes the garden, he will see the gate. After he got what he wanted, he ended up with the arena and asked for his forgiveness. It was a crucial moment now. Returning to the present, the doctor said that the guy must have used the fire to escape. If they want to catch him, they better hurry up. Orlando asked the series what was going on. The magician did not really answer anything and ordered him to start conjuring. Then she ordered Rolf to go to the royal guard. Orlando was confused, asked to wait a second. The girl turned to look at him angrily, and the guy decided to leave this question. The doctor who came up from behind said that it was better for him to obey the series. The series repeated, asking to carry out the order. He asked what the limit was. They replied that they needed to use everything they had. The enemy is extremely dangerous. He is even allowed to use a teleporter. He immediately began to cast a spell, and when he was done, he disappeared. The doctor who came up said that he used a short spell to teleport, as expected from a rank 3 magician. She smiled. After all, he was Grandpa's student, that's why he's so good. She returned to Rolf, saying that they would teleport him to the barracks and asked him to prepare the soldiers. He left getting the king's permission for her. Then the girl turned to the doctor. She needs to get an audience with the king as soon as possible. She asked if he could take care of everything here. He agreed. After reading a spell that was slightly different from the guy's spell, the girl also disappeared. With a bottle of alcohol, the man sat on the wreckage of the building and looked at the sky. A young magician appeared in the corridor out of nowhere. She was standing in front of 2 knights guarding the door. They thrust their spears forward, blocking the way. They asked who she was. The entrance to the throne room is closed. Also, such a frivolous use of teleportation will cost her her life. The magician took off her hood and shouted that it was urgent that they come and tell His Majesty. The knights saw that it was a series. They asked her what was going on. She ordered them to be silent. If they didn't report this to His Majesty immediately, she would use magic. After that, the knights opened the door for her. There was a man sitting on the throne. There was another one standing next to him. The king was looking at the series. She knelt in front of him. The chancellor of the empire, Ultomia Doltanist, shouted what it all meant. She committed such disrespectful acts in front of his majesty. He wondered why, if the matter was so urgent, the head of the royal magicians had not come here. He was trying to get an answer from a rank 2 wizard of the Vorkland series. The king told Tom to calm down. The series was trying hard for this unexpected audience, so something must have happened. He was the first emperor of the Ultomai Empire, Lionel Eisenhart. Therefore, the chancellor apologized for his rudeness. Now the king turned his attention to the magician, allowing her to speak. She asked his permission to hand over the command of the royal guards to her. The chancellor asked what she was talking about, how the magician wanted to command the royal guard. The emperor unexpectedly agreed. He will give permission for the transfer to the royal command if she can convince him. The chancellor asked his majesty what he was saying. He asked where Geiatsu was. The girl, clenching her teeth, replied that the head of the empire's magicians had been killed. At this moment, in another part of the castle, the main character was remembering that magician and what his name was. He kept looking at him with that contemptuous look. This clearly annoyed him. Earlier during the draft, the squatting guy was looking at the old man who was lying on the floor. He asked the old man why he had called him here. People from his world don't fight with swords or spears. The magician explained that it was because the people of his world had the ability to become the greatest wars in this world. In this world, when you kill a creature, its power becomes yours. He just absorbed the power of those 4 soldiers he killed. The old man said that if he kills a person, then he would need to kill 1,000 people to get the power of 1. If he kills a dragon, then he will receive the power of 1 after killing 100. Currently, while hiding, he was thinking that 100 dragons was too much. It looks like he's really in another world. Rolf and a girl in armor came out of the castle walls on horseback. A little later, in one of the taverns, the guy ordered some food for himself. Throwing the armor outside the city was a good idea. Those pursuing him would never think that he would be sitting inside the city and having lunch. Thanks to the money he took from the dead, he managed to buy new clothes. And what should he do now? From the side, he heard a woman's voice which said that she had never seen his face before. Is he really a traveler? She put one glass on the table. The guy grabbed the mug, asking if it was beer, but he didn't order it. The woman smiled and waved her hand. Because of him, her break is over, so at least he needs to have a drink with her. She asked him if he was drinking. Then she treats him and winks at him. The guy thought to himself that he was only 16. For some reason, this makes him feel uneasy. He really looks older than his age. He thanked me for the treat, bringing the mug to his mouth. The woman smiled, telling him that he was a good person. The guy asked why it was. She thought he was a good person because he was able to say sorry and thank you. She asked if this was his first time in the imperial capital. He replied that his parents had died unexpectedly due to illness. That's why he's thinking of living here. The woman's eyes were round. She apologized for asking. He asked if there was a good job here. He's pretty good with a sword. She thought a little. Blacksmithing won't suit him. He's an adult. He asked about the merchant. She replied that it was possible, but she would have to start as an apprentice. Remembering the sword, she suggested that he become a mercenary or an adventurer. The guy asked her again. The woman was surprised that he didn't know about them. He apologized for his lack of knowledge, but how could he become one? It turned out to be quite easy. All he needs to do is go to the bank and then register with the guild. Both buildings are nearby, and identification will not be required. After finishing, the guy left the institution. The hostess came out to see him off. She said that if he wanted to chat, he could come in. At night, this place becomes a tavern for guildsmen. Later, he joined the Adventurers Guild. At the entrance, the girl greeted him, asked what he wanted. He replied that he would like to register as an adventurer. The girl asked if he was a beginner and asked to show his bank card. He held it out to her, asking if everything was okay. She was surprised by the fact that he was 16. He said that the bank had asked him the same thing. Does he really look older than his age? The girl began to deny it and beg for forgiveness. The guy was obviously upset. He said everything was fine. He definitely didn't look like someone who was fine. Briefly introducing the course. The guild is a large organization with branches all over the continent. After registration, he will receive a rank and a level. Level is a measure of strength, and the rank can be increased or decreased based on achievements. Then she asked if he knew about power absorption. He replied that he did. If you kill a living being, part of its power becomes yours. At level 0, he has the usual strength of a common man. At level 1, it will double. He asked if she meant that at level 10 he would have the strength of 10 people. But on their own, only one person was able to reach level 7. He wondered why there was such an unusual level. The girl told him not to worry about it. And now about the quests. If this is a combat quest like destroying monsters, he will receive 3 copper coins for each individual. his rank will also increase. He asked if there were any missions that included trips outside the kingdom. Such missions did exist. They are called escort missions. For the F rank, there is only the opportunity to go to the nearest city and take missions there. These may be delivery missions. She took out one of the books and found the locations of Garuika, Merfolin, and Oito in it. The guy was thinking to himself that he was wanted, so he had to leave the Ultomai Empire as soon as possible. He could have used this chance to escape. The shortest path to the border is in the south. He told the girl that he would take travel missions to Merfolin in the east. A little later, he went into a gun stall. The shopkeeper was smoking a pipe and looking at the guy. The guy was upset by the fact that there really were no katanas here. Shamshir or any other long ball would have been enough for him. He remembered the moment when he was talking to the woman who owned the tavern. She asked if he had a gun. The guy replied complacently that, of course, his weapon was his bare hands. The woman told him that it was extremely stupid. Usually adventurers are not killed by big strong monsters because you can just run away from most of them. They are being killed by creatures weaker than them because they were careless. You never know what might happen outside the city, so he should be prepared for anything. She recalled the moment when a young guy promised to get rich and buy her tavern, but did not appear again for an understandable reason. That lady was right, he doesn't know anything about this world. He turned back to the merchant and apologized, saying that he was looking for a more comfortable weapon. The merchant briefly replied that he did not keep such a thing. In anger, he shouted that there was nothing convenient in his weapon, and he should not try to say it again. The guy said that the owner of the tavern told him to come here. The man shouted that he should have talked about this earlier. He asked him if he was a beginner. He began to lament that the guy was no longer young. What does he do then? The guy actually just signed up for the guild today. He thought that this had happened many times today. The man asked to wait, but explained that he would no longer say heresy like convenient or suitable in his shop. The man handed him the dagger, asking about it. The guy took the weapon out of its scabbard and immediately realized that this dagger was forged according to a certain recipe. The surprised man shouted how did he understand this. The guy explained that although it is cheap, such forging makes it very difficult to break down, to some extent. The man, however, was surprised. He told the young man that he clearly had an eye for guns. If possible, the guy would like a one-handed sword with a curved blade. The man asked if he was referring to a katana, a weapon from another world. The guy was surprised to ask if he had one, but the seller said no, he doesn't even know how they are made. It looks like a normal weapon would be useless to him. The man went behind the counter and told Tom to follow him. He will show him his collection of another world. In his collection there was a tonfa, a weapon from Okinawa. There was also a 3-section staff. There were nunchucks who could level the odds well. And sai can be used not only for attack but also as a defense. The guy was looking at the provided weapon. The merchant asked him if he knew how to use them. The guy, examining the 3-section staff, said that he kind of could. Then there were the gabishi, a short weapon designed for attacks. There was a chakram, a throwing weapon from ancient India. There was a folding baton, a weapon with high mobility. The guy decided to try tonfa. He turned them expertly. The man was extremely surprised that the guy really knows how to use it. Sighing, he said that it would not do, he simply could not feel their practical application. He saw the Mariki Hazars to the side. He once tried to train with them with his grandfather, and he really will be able to use it, probably. As a result, he chose Chakram and Mariki Gusari for himself. He also asked me to pack the sword. He thanked the merchant for showing them to him. He just needs to get used to this sword. A little later, when it was already night outside, the guy went back to the place where he met the hostess. She, holding a mug of foam in her hand, noticed the ringing at the door. When she saw that the guy had come to them again, she ran up to him, asking how everything went. The one with the weapon on his back replied that, as she sees it, successfully. She was happy for him, asking if he had already received the quest letter. The guy didn't understand what kind of cross letter she was talking about. The woman said he should have received one from the guild. The guy, examining the uniform, said that he did not have it. The man standing behind the hostess was asking who this young guy was. Was he really a beginner? The woman, turning to him, confirmed this, saying that he had forgotten to receive the quest letter. But it's okay because every newbie makes mistakes, and he needs to go back to the guild tomorrow and get it. The guy bowed, thanking him for telling about it. The man said it was nonsense. Instead, he threw his arm over the guy's shoulders and shouted to the whole tavern that this man had become a beginner, and it was necessary to raise a toast to him. He asked the people to be kinder to the newcomer. When it was quite late outside, the guy was lying on the bed. He reflected that everything had finally calmed down, and he was even able to find a place to sleep. He was lucky that he changed clothes quickly enough. Thanks to this, the next group passed by without noticing him. Despite this, he should not lower his vigilance. That man is Rolf. He's definitely a good warrior. and the girl series can also turn out to be quite strong. And also that young magician. But the problem was with the woman with whom Rolf left the gate on horseback. Even though he only saw her for a second, goosebumps ran down his spine. If he explained it in chess terms, then she would be the queen. At this time in the Night Squad, that same woman was the first princess of the Oltomai Empire, Shaldana Eisenhart. From the side, a soldier with glasses called out to Shaldana. The guy asked her how they could even find someone without knowing his face. Or maybe she has some special information about the perpetrator. She calmly said that everything was fine, not even knowing his face. She can still identify this killer. Syria, surrounded by soldiers, shouted to the whole street what it all meant, and why they weren't catching the killer. The princess replied that it was dangerous to continue at night. They would go back and review their countermeasures for tomorrow. The magician is sure that while they are doing this, this man can escape. The princess looked at Orlando and told him to take the series away from here. He was right behind the girl. Picking her up in his arms, he apologized to the series. She screamed, asking to be let in. But he couldn't help her with that. Rolf came up and asked where they were going to go tomorrow. The princess replied that she would go east while they would go south. The man thought about her desire to go east. After all, if he wants to escape the country, won't he go south, to the border closest in a southerly direction? But she just has a strange feeling about the east. There are many reasons why this killer could have gone east, and her guess is one of them. That's why they entrust the south to others. Besides, she has a talented assistant. It was Sada. He came from the Ryer continent. He was now the princess's assistant. Rolf asked about the mobilization of the Adelpho garrison. The princess said they couldn't. If they attract a garrison, Zaryuda will attack them, and of course you should not count on the help of the nobles. Rolf said that it really is. They were lucky that after Gayetsu's death the nobles did not rebel. That's why they have no other options at all, even if the advantage is not on their side. At that moment, the guy decided to test his skills with a new weapon. Grabbing throwing blades, he swung at a pack of wolves, fired the weapon in their direction, hitting one of the monsters. The others reacted instantly, growled, and rushed at him. He took out a sword from his back and pointed it towards the monsters. From that moment, his fight began. A little later, when he came back to the guild building, the guy put a huge bag on the table. The girl asked to give her time to count everything. He caught 54 wild dogs, 31 wild bees, 39 wild rabbits. That's quite a lot. 10 km east of the capital of Ultomia, there was an adventurers guild, the Merfolin branch. The guy said that because of the large number of monsters he killed, the sword he bought yesterday was blunted and he would like to sharpen it. The girl asked him if he had hunted them with just a sword and if this was all his prey in one day. The guy confirmed her guesses. She thought he was some kind of magician with destruction magic or something. His reward was 4 silver and 31 copper coins. His lunch cost 5 copper coins, so that's about 43,000 yen. The guy was obviously happy about it. The girl behind the counter congratulated Mikoshiba because now he is WF rank. The guy is surprised that his rank has increased. The girl noticed that he was not particularly happy about it. The guy said it wasn't like that. It was just unexpected for him. He thinks it's a joke. The girl noticed that this is exactly what talented people say, and here's the most interesting part. After increasing the rank, his rewards are doubled. Now you can earn a lot of money, but of course, the value of his achievement will not change in any way. This meant that here he could earn 100,000 yen a day. He remembered his aunt's words that adventurers mostly die because of their carelessness, and he should be attentive to a being weaker than him. It's dangerous to be overconfident. The guy asked the girl how much the healing potions cost. It turned out that he would need gold to buy magic-created potions. Since a high-grade potion will cost him 10 gold, the guy was shocked at how expensive it was. Looking at the bottle that the girl handed him, he realized that this thing was worth 1 million yen. In this world, injury means certain death. And there is no insurance here. I should have bought a spare sword just in case. At the moment of his reflection, someone made a fuss. It was an adventurer. He asked what it all meant and why he couldn't get his reward because he risked his life for it. The man behind the counter explained to Goras that although he was a swordsman of the first rank, his adventurer rank was 3. He managed to neutralize the robber. But this robber was not one of the Red Moon bandits mentioned in the quest. And while he was wasting his time on it, they attacked a village nearby, and a lot of girls were abducted. The angry adventurer asked if he meant that if he had destroyed the bandits of the Red Moon, then nothing would have happened. But the man noticed that he hadn't said that, but it could have been prevented. These kidnapped girls will surely be sold to merchants as servants. The guy finally realized that it was his fault and agreed to pay the fine and told Tom to just withdraw money from his account. The main character was looking at what was happening. The girl behind the counter said that this happens a lot. The guy asked if she meant not giving up the quest. Goraz is a good mercenary, but this time he forgot about the investigation necessary for an adventurer, which led to this result. In most cases, quests affect the future of many people, and she asked him not to forget about it. Later in the mountains, the guy was walking and thinking about quests. He had thought before that it was too superficial. It's different from the game. Everything here can even affect the life of the person who submitted the quest. He was examining the map. If he continues to move east, he will approach the city of Arrow, but shouldn't there be bandits in the area? But he doesn't see anyone. He suddenly shuddered. An overturned wagon lay on the ground. The men around her were happy that they had a big catch today. After all, business has been booming lately. Of course, they stole a lot in that village. And also in the chest they saw a lot of gold coins. There were at least 500 of them. And even the girls who were inside this carriage. The men wanted to disobey the boss's words. Two young girls were sitting apart from the men. One man suggested that after all they could just get rid of these girls. After all, the boss wouldn't know that there were servants here anyway. One of the men approached the girl and said that her master was very heartless because he had escaped with the guards. Another said they had no other choice. Being caught by the bandits of the Red Moon is tantamount to death. Ryoma was watching all this in the bushes nearby. The girls sitting on the grass looked at the robbers. One of them screamed that if they touched them, they would bite off their tongues. The men laughed. They said to stop joking because they are servants, and when they are wearing these collars, they will not be able to do anything. And to rebel, among other things. One of them chose a girl for himself, saying that he was going with her, and then he would move on to the girl with the silver hair. He told the younger robber to look both ways and hold the girl's hands. Ryoma, who was watching this, was clearly displeased. The man began to unbutton his shirt. The girls looked at him with fear. As he reached for one of them, Remo appeared, disarming him. Remo continued to attack the bandits. The bandits nearby shouted who he was, and how he dared to contact the bandits of the Red Moon. Remo plunged his sword into the ground and walked straight at them without a weapon. The bandit was surprised by what he was doing. The guy neutralized another one with his bare hand. Remo decided to use the chakram to attack the next one. Throwing the discs, the hero drew his new sword and destroyed the opponents. The rest were also instantly neutralized by weapons. Only the last one remains. Swinging his fist, he hit him in the face and knocked out his opponent. The girls watched in shock. Ryoma, who was standing with his back to them, asked if they were okay. It looks like everything went well in his opinion. One of the girls looked at him. She took a piece of cloth from somewhere and approached the guy, wiped his cheek. The guy took the girl's hand away from her face, saying that he was fine, and asked if everything was okay with them. The girls came up and asked for forgiveness for such a late performance. One of them called herself Rora and the other Sarah. The guy realized that they were twins. He asked them if they were okay. She replied with a smile on her face that she did. They bowed to the guy, thanking him for saving them. But the guy denied it. He had no right, in his opinion, to accept their gratitude. In order to kill them all, he waited until they lowered their weapons, right up to the moment when they almost took action. So he waited, and there were a lot of things that could scare them at this time. He's not going to make excuses because he made them have a painful experience. Sarah said that everything was fine because it could have been much worse. Rora agreed with her words. They can't thank him enough, but they kept doing it anyway. If they say that, then everything is fine, but still something worried me. The hero looked at the girls and thought how beautiful they were. One of the girls, noticing how he was examining them, asked if everything was all right. The guy said that everything was fine, he was just thinking about things. Their outfits are similar to the dresses of Arab belly dancers, but most of all the eye clings to their collars and shackles. The guy asked what the girl's last name was already. The girl with the impenetrable face said that the servants did not have a last name. The guy slapped his forehead with his palm, which surprised the girl standing next to him. It wasn't good. He shouldn't have poked his nose into it. Rora apologized and asked if he could tell them his name. The guy, forgetting about it, said that he was Mikoshiba Ryoma. He asked the girls what they were going to do now. If they want, he can bring them to the Aru. They asked for forgiveness, but they can't leave here without their master's permission. He asked if she was serious now. She confirmed it. The guy pointed his hand towards the forest and asked, "Where is this owner she is talking about at the moment?" The owner ran away with the guards when the bandits appeared. And so their master ran away and left the two of them here. The guy asked again if they were going to just stand there now. The girls confirmed it. They cannot move without the master's order. He didn't know if this was really happening right now. The Empire is still chasing him. To be honest, he just wanted to get them to the city as soon as possible and disperse. They are both servants, someone's property. He can't help, only to a certain extent. He said they didn't know what kind of monsters might appear once it got dark, so he's just going to clean up all these bodies for now. And then he will go. The girls thanked me once again for the help. The guy was thinking that he could only help to a certain extent. He just acted like a hypocrite, isn't it? Remo carried the bodies far enough away from the two girls when I heard a loud scream. Grabbing one of the girls and loading her onto a horse, the thief shouted in the direction of the guy that he shouldn't have relaxed so much. He had memorized his face and now he would find it. The second girl was lying on the ground, screaming her sister's name. The situation couldn't have been worse. It seemed to him that he had killed everyone. The potion bottle was lying open on the ground. A bottle for 1 million, did it really work? But the man on the horse was too fast, how could he catch up with him now? He ran up to the sitting girl asking if her sister was dead, but she was fine. He asked her not to worry and he would come up with something. She asked to fulfill one of her requests. She asked me to make a small incision on the little finger of his left hand. The guy asked her what she meant. The girl screamed that they didn't have much time. The guy still did what she wants. Asking her if this little cut would do, she replied that it would. Next, she cut her finger as well. He always had a strange feeling about these two. Are they really ordinary servants or not? The girl began to cast a spell. The guy confused her words with a prayer. With her spells, she created a contract between them by connecting their blood. Instantly, all the chains were broken. Turning to the guy, she called him the master and apologized for using her powers. The girl started a new spell. He began to understand what was going on and what kind of spell it was. It was a cut. She pointed it straight at the bandit. The bandit was scared. Who would have thought that that woman turned out to be a magician? A lot of wind blades were flying straight at him. The guy remembered that it was the thing that the old man used. The girl continued to use her spells. She managed to disable the horse, which caused the bandit to fly into the air and fall to the ground. Rora turned to the guy, calling him master. The one sitting on the ground saw her outstretched palm. She was telling him that they needed to get Sarah back. She freed herself from the shackles and began to cast a spell. She managed to get the rider off the horse. She was telling Rama that they needed to bring Sarah back. He did not understand how to return it, except to run. They are more than a kilometer away. Rora began to cast a windy protection spell. The guy felt the magic enveloping his body. The girl grabbed his arm, saying that she would start running. The guy asked her to wait for a second, and at the same moment they took off faster than the wind. They were all getting closer to Sarah. The guy was afraid that they would collide, but the girl managed to slow down in time, and the guy realized that it looked like it was his stops. Rora immediately ran up to her sister. She was crying, hugging Rora. The guy did not understand how it was possible to cover such a long distance in the blink of an eye. It's wind magic. The girl turned to him asking if he didn't know about her. He didn't know what to do. He can't say he has no idea, but she already suspects something. The girl really thought that having such a level of martial arts but at the same time not knowing about magic at all. It was weird. Sarah turned to her sister. The latter, instantly catching herself, grabbed her by the shackles asking if she was hurt, but she didn't resist, so it's all right. Ryoma finally remembered about the bandit and started looking for him. It turned out that his legs were stuck under the horse, so that he would not be able to move. Sarah approached the thief with an emotionless face. She asked her sister what they should do with this man. Rora replied that it was up to the owner to decide. The surprised guy asked if she had a lead under his master. She replied positively. He said that if she didn't mind, then he would decide. Sarah also agreed. The guy grabbed the hilt behind his back, pulled out his sword. The frightened thief shouted at him not to approach, asked him to move away from him. The man shouted that he needed to let him go. If he wants money, he can give it. He no longer knew what to give the guy to let him go. He started threatening. Does the guy know that they have more than 100 people in the organization in the Bandits of the Red Moon? They are even part of Zaryuta's army. If he dares to contact them, then Zaryuta will not let it go. The guy asked how dumb he was. If he kills him here, who will know that he did it, or he's going to report to Zaryuta after he dies? The man panicked. He certainly can't let him stay alive. He must understand that the dead don't talk. The man asked to stop, saying that he had a daughter, but the guy was not confused and he took care of him. The girls watched this and asked if he was confident in his choice of a way to deal with him. The guy asked if this was a problem. Rora replied that she did not. I was just wondering if they would be able to extract information. The guy also noted that they don't even know if what they said is true. You shouldn't believe everything the thief says, but come on. It was good that he managed to get her sister back. Then she thanked the owner. The guy finally decided to ask the question he was interested in, why she was calling him master. All this time I was wondering why all of a sudden. The girl smiled and wondered if they hadn't taken a blood oath. So of course she will call her master. He asked if she meant by the blood oath that they had mixed their blood. That's exactly what she meant. Sarah asked if he could perform the blood oath ritual with her as well. Rora, beaming, told the owner to take an oath with Sarah. He held out his palm and asked for time to rest. He also reminded Rora that she shouldn't be serving or anything. They cried and asked if he hated them, but he explained that it wasn't really about that. They didn't understand what was the matter then. The guy was thinking that he needed to keep a clean mind. That wasn't the point at all, but shouldn't the two of them be waiting for their master right here? It turned out that if they formed a blood oath, they would no longer have to obey his orders. But right now, Sarah is bound by his curse and can't move. It turns out that if he does this, then they can go to the city later. They said yes if they form a blood oath. They just need to get this blood oath thing over with as soon as possible. But after they reach the city, they will have to explain everything. If they set off now, they would be able to reach Aru by nightfall. The girls agreed with him, but now they'd better go back to the wagon and get their luggage and everything of value from there. They returned to the overturned carriage, and it turned out that there was someone at the carriage. It was a man. He turned to them. He was very surprised when he saw the girls. He came over asking if they were okay. He asked if the bandits had harmed them and if they were okay. He lied about how much he was worried, asked the girls if these bandits had done something to them. He spent 5 years cultivating and nurturing them. What should he do if the price of them drops? He started touching one of the girls and she pushed his hand aside. Sarah moved away from him and shouted at him not to approach, holding out her sword in his direction. If he came closer, she would pierce him through. The man was shouting about how she dared to be rude to him. He called them ungrateful. How dare they point a sword at their master because they are just things. Ryoma, who was watching this, asked Rora if this fat man was their master. She said that he was the one. He asked if he was an enemy. He's always been one. After hearing this, the guy reached for the sword and handed it to the girl. Drawing attention to this, the man called Ramu a giant and told him that he would stop doing useless nonsense. Licking his lips, the man noticed that he had a pretty good body. He asked him if he was trying to play Prince Charming. He would definitely be able to sell him as a working servant. At that moment, one of the Indian rings flew into his face. The man, who had not yet had time to realize what had happened, noticed how two girls with swords ran towards him and pierced them. Blood sprayed in all directions. Finally, the girls defeated their enemy and looked at their bloody hands. The guy took his sword away from one of the girls, saying that he wanted to ask them a lot of questions. But first you need to get to the Aru and then discuss all this. The girls gave their consent. They understood that. A lifeless body lay near the cart. Ryoma thought to himself that he just wanted to save someone, but he seems to be in even more trouble. A little later, they reached the city. The girls washed together in the shower. The guy decided to have a snack while waiting for the girls. They called out to the owner, asking for forgiveness for waiting. He turned to them, saying that they needed to talk while eating. They shouldn't. They stand rooted to the spot and need to sit down. The girls refused because it was not proper for servants to sit at the same table with the master. The young man looks at the two beautiful girls in surprise. The guy looked questioningly at the girls who were in front of him in only towels after a shower. He said to stop and wait a minute. He found some long shirts, putting them on the girls. Leaning his palm against his forehead, he thought that at least they were wearing something. But now there is one more question. He said to sit down as soon as possible because now they need to have dinner. Rora said they would eat later. They are not allowed to sit at the same table with the owner. He noticed that the food would have cooled down by this time, but it turned out that servants like them had never eaten warm food before. He would like to ask them something. Do they always obey the words of their master? The girls replied that it was so, but he's the one who owns them now. Then as the host, he orders them to sit on a chair and eat with him. The guy awkwardly scratched his head, saying that when you eat alone, the taste of food becomes crappy. At that moment, he was remembering his gatherings at the table at home. The servants replied that if that was the order, then they would obey it. On the contrary, the two girls began to eat. The guy noticed that it smelled awkward. The guy said it was because they all exchanged a blood oath. He wants to confirm. He asked if he had become their master. Their relationship became like that of master and servants and was formed with the help of a blood oath. And because of this, they became his battle servants. Besides the working servants and the servant girls, there are also combat servants. Such servants are used for battles, but under normal circumstances their power is sealed, so they can't rebel against their master. That's why they can't fight without the master's permission. He asked in that case how the two of them were able to take a blood oath of their own free will. Weren't they the servants of that merchant back then? If servants can freely change their masters, what is the point of sealing their powers at all? Rora asked the owner to keep what she was about to tell him a secret. In fact, their last name is Malfist. Their family served as senior knights in the kingdom of Kuift, located on the west coast of the central continent. The guy realized that if the family was knights, then they were both noblewomen. 5 years ago, during the war with the kingdom of Shadora, the chancellor's betrayal led to the fall of the kingdom, and they had to escape by ship. But they were deceived by their guard, whom they trusted for so many years, after which they were sold to the traitor Azos. The guy realized that they had been through fire and water. The girls were clearly angry. They trusted these guards, but then they didn't even realize how weak people were in the face of temptation. The guy noticed that if they hadn't sold them, they would have had to kill them. But on the other hand, Azasu is the merchant they encountered near the wagon. All their knowledge about battle servants was gained from him, but their father taught them how to take a blood oath. He said that one day she would definitely help them. The guy thought that their father had somehow predicted this outcome of events. This is strange. Did he do this with the intention that if they ever became servants, they would be able to somehow deal with this situation, with the help of a blood oath? He asked if he was mistaken, but no, he was absolutely right. They had been waiting so long for someone they could trust, and that someone turned out to be Rama. But why? He had protected them even though he didn't have to. The guy decided to put aside the questions because he understood everything. As their master, he sets them free. He handed over the bag of money he had received from Azasu. They should use them and start a new life. The girls replied that they couldn't do it. After all, he protected not only them, but also the purity and life of the Malfist family. They want to repay him even if it costs them their lives. But the guy also had his own circumstances. Rora asked the owner if she could find out something. She was curious about what was bothering the owner. Is this due to the fact that the owner is a person who came from another world? The guy froze at this question, not even knowing what to answer. The girls noticed whether it was magic or a blood oath, he knew absolutely nothing about it. And when someone with the master's level doesn't know it, it looks incredibly strange. He decided to honestly admit that he came from another world. He was drafted by a guy from the Empire named Gayatsu and has been on the run ever since. Fortunately, no one knows what he looks like. So he will be honest that they will only slow him down, and he definitely never thought about having servants. But if they find their tracks, they will start chasing them too. He wants them to go their own way of their own free will. They understand. He asked them to come to their senses because one day he would have to return to his world. In this case, the girls will pay until then. Sarah asked her sister what if the master took them with him to his own world. The sister approved, telling Sarah that it was a wonderful idea. They should definitely go there together. His grandfather and girlfriend will obviously be shocked by this. I've already imagined coming home with two girls. They will say that they did not know that he was actually one of those people, and then they'll kill you. The guy opened his eyes. It turns out that it was all a dream. He turned to the side on the bed of the sleeping girls. Well, if he moves with them, it will be harder for people to spot a fugitive in him. The first step is to cross the border. Later, they went into a jewelry store trying to hand over the loot. He shook out a bag of jewelry, asked for their value. The seller asked me to wait. Further apologizing for the expectations, she said that he would receive about 3,000 gold coins for this. The girl asked him if he was satisfied with this amount. She apologized, but if he was going to exchange these items at the same time, then this was the largest amount they could offer him. When he came to, he said he wasn't disappointed and all that. He was worried about something else. The girl turned to him and said she would give him the money immediately. He noticed that she smiled. Had he been tricked? Well, anyway, in any case, he can't take back his words. It's time to go back to the hotel. He called the girls, they turned to look at him, and he gave them each a ring. Before exchanging all those jewelry for money, he took these 2 rings from there and wants to give them to them. In any case, the matter is becoming more and more problematic. Who would have thought that the border was blocked? One of the girls heard from the guild that Princess Shaldna herself came here. If this was a regular blockade, they would just be able to bribe someone. But if they go against the princess, it will amount to a death sentence. The worst thing is that it will be considered treason to the state. The princess is here to catch him. But he doesn't need to apologize, but there is such a huge chase after him. They should move very carefully. But staying in one place for a long time is clearly dangerous. If you look at it geographically, the eastern border is blocked, so they can't get through there. If so, they can only follow the main road from the city and escape through the northern forest. But this may be exactly what the enemy wants. At least, if he were in their place, he would definitely have set several traps there. Although, if you think about it, in any case, he suggested escaping through the northern forest. He would show them who was the hunter and who was the prey. They need to imagine that the killer is heading east, and since they have already blocked the border, the only way out of here is through the forest. So the princess's assistant said that they just need to leave the traps here, but they still don't know what he looks like. But it wasn't a problem for the princess. They just need to hear their words from him from the mouth of the killer himself. She has a way to find out if he came from another world or not. They were in the north of Aru, in the border forest. The guy was sitting by the fire on a log. The branch next to him was broken. He turned at the sound. A man came out to him saying that he didn't need to be so wary. It was the princess's assistant. He said not to worry because he's not a thug. He apologized for scaring the guy. He asked permission to sit next to me, and without waiting for an answer, he sat down. Ryoma said he didn't remember letting him sit here, but the men said that it smells very good here, and he asked what he had forgotten in such a place. He looks like an adventurer. Ryoma said he had heard that the border behind the macaw was blocked, and since he doesn't know when it will open again, he decided to cross the forest. He pulled something fried out of the fire and said he wouldn't share it with him. The man smiled, saying it was disappointing, but still he would not advise him to move through the forest alone. After all, the surroundings of the city are simply crowded with roaming dogs. What if someone is following him? Ryoma, smiling, asked why he was walking alone in the forest. But before that, he would like to ask who he is. The man apologized for the late introduction and called himself Sato Hidaki. He was the vice captain of the succubus knights of the Ultomai Empire. The guy tensed up and, looking at what was hanging on the branch as if I was apologizing, said that on the other hand, would he like a piece? He thanked me. The man almost immediately admitted that he was actually chasing a man in this forest, and he was terribly sorry that he did not know his face. So he asked him to humbly accompany him to his camp. Later, when he came to the camp itself, he entered Her Majesty's tent, saying that he had captured a man who must have come from another world. He had the same smell as Sato himself. The princess said she recognized her captain and asked to be shown the way. She wants to try it out. Ryoma was sitting on the ground in shackles. The vice captain came into the tent and apologized for waiting. His boss wanted to meet him extremely badly, so they arrived. Ryoma replied that he didn't mind. But aren't shackles already too much? He asked if they would be removed when his suspicions were lifted. He was told that, of course. After all, now everything depends only on the words of the princess. She thanked him for giving a grain of his time and asked him to accept her gratitude on behalf of the empire. The guy asked if she was the princess of Chaldini. She confirmed that she was the one apologizing for their rudeness. The guy calmly replied that everything was fine because crossing forests in such a situation, however, looks like a suspicious business. But the princess replied that it was not at all suspicious because it was he, a man from another world whom they were looking for. He asked what she was talking about, but it's useless to pretend to be an idiot. Even after a member of the royal family used an extremely formal speech in conversation with him, he spoke quite normally. This is something that the people of this world cannot afford. After all, royalty in this world are like gods, and ordinary people would immediately prostrate themselves if they heard what she said to him. He understood what the problem was. The princess was surprised at how quickly he accepted this and asked what his name was. He replied that his name was Mikoshiba Ryoma. The other person realized that he was Japanese. Sato was just like him. He was called into this world 10 years ago. The princesses said that was enough of the chatter. Remo will be sent back to the captain, and they will think carefully about what to do with him. The latter sarcastically thanked him. The princess was surprised that despite his weak physical strength, after the summoning he still managed to escape and make it all the way. It was a shame for her. After all, if he wanted to work for them, then it would be much easier to unite these lands. The one with the bag exhaled for him to work for them. He wants them to stop making him laugh. The princess did not understand if a summoner should not obey the summoner. Even the sight realized that this was outright nonsense. Why is he so relaxed? Doesn't he understand his current situation? The scouts will return at any moment, and there are more than enough soldiers without them. But he can't get rid of this feeling of anxiety. The sight approached the princess, asking for forgiveness for his rudeness. Even though His Majesty ordered him to be delivered alive, they should finish him off right here. The princess asked him to stop. He dared to disobey His Majesty's direct order. How dare he take out a sword right in front of her? Sato will willingly accept his punishment, but that's later. He held the sword up to the guy, saying that because they were born in the same country, he would let him say the last words. But Ryoma doesn't have them. He did possess a certain amount of courage. But the fact is that this is not quite true, because they will be the ones who will have to die here, not Rama. This time, Sarah directed his spell at the tent where everyone was. The knight managed to push the princess away in time. The guy, on the contrary, guessed that these were the blades of the wind. It was magic. Sarah approached the owner, saying that it was nice to see that he was all right. He noticed that she appeared at an incredible time and thanked her. Sato was surprised to see that he had a friend. Ryoma said that she did a really cool spell and didn't even touch him. The girl said she couldn't hurt her master. The guy turned in different directions, wondering where Rora was. It turns out she's dealing with the others. It was at this moment that she appeared in front of them, saying that she had already finished. There are not many people in this world who can use magic, and if they decide to work for the Empire, they are guaranteed to be awarded at least the rank of knight. It depends on the abilities, but one magician can match an entire army. The princess asked who they were. The girls replied that the enemies of the master and their enemies, and they obey only him. The princess thought to herself that these girls looked quite capable. Even though they are so good, but why should they follow Ramai? The princess called Sato. Ramu asked if they didn't think it was a little late for a retreat. Sarah replied that it was a great chance to earn fame for herself. If they manage to kill a member of the royal family, his fame will spread throughout the continent. The deputy did not understand what to do. Will he be able to cope with them in any way if he gives his best? At least save the princess. Ryoma, calling the girls, said that was enough. In the beginning, he planned to kill them, but they looked quite experienced. Yes, they have a 3-2 numerical advantage, but there is always a place for an accident. If they continue to fight, one or even both of them may die. Sato is the same, he's just trying to protect his royal person, and he doesn't want the two of them to die. The girls were touched that their lives were considered equivalent to the life of a royal person. The princess also ordered Sato to put his sword aside. The conscript thanked them for their understanding and called the girls to follow him. The vice-captain shouted at him to stop. After all, he wanted to ask something. Was Ryoma some kind of mafia boss in Japan? Ramo said he was just an ordinary high school student. But Sato didn't believe him, saying that he was talking seriously. He replied that he was really only 16. He was called up from the peaceful era in Japan. Why was he able to kill someone so easily? Then Ryoma also had a question for him. Since some time ago, he lost the right to protect himself from people who wanted to kill him. Or Sato says that he should have stood still when someone hits him. Hitting back is quite an obvious action, isn't it? That's why he never hits anyone first. But he won't hold back when someone hits him. He chooses battle only when he is determined to kill. But now is not the time to talk about his philosophy. He waved the girls to follow him. The princess said they could run wherever they wanted, but one day the empire would unite the entire continent, and then there would be nowhere else to run. He only replied that then they should just return to his world. They set off to travel further through the forest and mountains. Finally, we arrived at the Doshu Desert. Now they should head to the shopping area in the vicinity of the oasis. They will be able to buy the necessary things and find a way to return to Earth. A worm suddenly appeared from the ground and attacked the heroes. A sandworm appeared from the ground. He turned his back on the guy and seemed to be openly inviting him to attack him. But it could also be a trap, so they doubted it. Ryoma told the girls to do it. The worm has extremely good eyesight. The guy had an idea that gives an advantage over someone's eyesight. In addition, the more people involved, the more effective it is, and he didn't see any risk in it. At least they should have tried. At that moment, the worm turned to them. A little later, having almost finished with the monster, the girls told the owner to deliver the last blow. But he decided to leave it to them. They do not suffer from such a hobby. But the girls wanted to give him the last blow so that he could absorb the prana. After all, the people of his world can absorb more. This feature was very similar to the games. It was exactly the same there. While doing all this, he thought that he wanted to return to Tokyo as soon as possible. After a while, they reached the kingdom of Helneskula, the oasis city of Myras. The city resembled ancient Egypt. They got to the high-ranked magician Animaria. She told me that there is no way to return to Earth. The guy was extremely upset and angry. They spent 2 months crossing the desert, but in the end they heard this answer. He was sure she knew a way. But there are only 3 types of magic in this world, and he knows about it. It's a martial arts magic to enhance someone's abilities. Also, the magic of the word, in which you need to read the spell in advance, offering your prana to god, demon, or spirit. And last of all, the magic of talent, in which a seal is applied to a weapon. Of these 3, summoning magic refers to the magic of the word. The summoner must offer his prana to God. Summoning a person from another world is not that difficult. But in order to bring him back, prana must be offered to the god of his world. In other words, you need to get permission from his god so that he can return to Earth. The guy guessed that all he needed to know was the name of God. Then he'll be fine. He knows the names, the many gods. If this is not enough, he will be able to gather information from the people who have been called up, just like his. He would also be able to find some records if he could. The woman handed them a book that contains records of people like him who wanted to return to their home world. She doesn't know who told him that she could bring him back to her world. But most likely, he did it because he knows that she kept this book. The names of all the gods that had already been tried were written in the book. This book has also been edited for several hundred years. It showed the guy how difficult everything is. But unlike others, he was quite lucky, since only he owns the rights to his life. After a while, the girls, standing on the balcony, looked at the city. They thought that when he saved them or when he fought with the princess, he was surprisingly calm. Now he went berserk. The owner is a very kind man, but Sarah thought he was angry now because he was furious right now. Rora denied this because it may seem that he is angry that he cannot return to his world, but the reason was that they made an element out of his relatives. For example, what would Sarah think if Rora became someone's servant against her will? She would have killed this man and brought her back in every possible way. That was the answer to why the guy was so angry. Being a battle servant is not so bad, but there are people who don't have the ability to do that. And this has been going on for centuries. The master thinks about all those people who were forcibly made servants, about all their rage. And now all his anger is directed at their world, and there is a chance that the flame of his anger will be able to burn everything in this world without a trace. Ryoma himself has been sitting in his room for 2 days and has not eaten anything. It was as if he had fallen into some kind of coma. He was in a dark place where nothing could be seen. A voice whispered to him that he had to awaken his rage. He called himself the being that understands him best. He promised to be with him. The guy was shocked, didn't understand what was going on. A huge creature somewhat resembling a human appeared in front of him. He asked Remo what his wish was. The guy just wants to go home, to the house where Grandpa and Asuka are. The creature replied that the possibility is not zero, but it requires appropriate sacrifices and determination. He must understand what is required of him to do. He should be angrier and think about who is the cause of everything that happened. For him, the reason was the magician Gaesu. But this is the wrong answer. This world itself is bad, and the blame lies with the one who created this world by sacrificing his relatives. He must return what is rightfully his to kill, defile and leave your body to the creature. He has the power to destroy this world. Suddenly, he was awakened by the loud screams of the girls who ran up to him. They were trying to check on his well-being. They heard him screaming. They know it's rude, but they were stealing by force. But thank God that everything was fine with him. They suggested going to get something to eat first, because he hadn't eaten since he locked himself in the room. The guy turned around and saw the door that was broken into 2 parts. The girls were breaking down the door to get into the room when they heard him scream. The guy, a little embarrassed, said if they knew that they could just ask the owner for the key. He went downstairs to get some food. Going into the room where the woman was cooking, she said that he had time while she was still hot. He could have taken her to his room. She gave him a tray full of food and he asked if it was too much. He knows that he eats a lot, but even that is too much. She replied that it was for 2 more servants. It turns out that these 2 haven't eaten since he locked himself in. She called him insensitive. He thanked her for her concern, but she said that gratitude was not necessary. This was a business, and he was clearly thanking the wrong people. He was about to leave when she said that he would have to go through that door. The guy entered the room through the curtain, which they replaced the second part with. They sat down at an improvised table. I'm helping myself to food. Rora handed him a plate, asking him to calm his anger. He apologized for making me worry. They said that everything was fine, but this world was their home. And no matter how much the master hates this world, they will always be his allies, whether now or in the future. The guy slammed his hands on the table, saying that they were fools. The girls cringed in fear. They thought they only made him angrier, but the guy sat back down, thanking them for everything. He was able to contain his anger. Even if he cried, everything would be fine. He always acts like an adult, but in fact he is still a child. The girls laughed at him and he blushed and asked them not to do it. The guy was able to kill a huge mantis. Now they needed to collect his bodily fluids. Rora asked why the owner did not lay his hands on Azos's money and continued to wander. He said that in this world he had no family, no home to return to, and even no friends. There is only himself. Therefore, he decided to continue wandering in order to somehow understand the meaning of all this. The girl asked if this was the new meaning of life. He replied that it was something like that. He goes traveling to hone his skills. Fortunately, what he learned from the creature served him well. There is power inside him. Rora corrected him, saying that he has no friends and family in this world is wrong. After all, he has them with Sarah. Indeed, he had completely forgotten about it, that he had such good allies. A small port city by the ocean. The heroes walked around, looking at everything around them, and they noticed a man in a masquerade mask. They entered the trading city of Fulzar and met with the master of the Val's Heinekal Guild. His assignment was a forced quest. To be honest, he's in a difficult situation. But the guy didn't understand why they shouldn't do it. He had a premonition of something like this as soon as he heard that he was personally summoned by the guild master himself. Remo said that the guild rules state that only high-ranking adventurers are accepted for forced quests. The man replied that it was just a shortage of staff. He knows that this request is unexpected from him, but it came from an extremely valuable client. Their mission was to escort a group of merchants from this city to the kingdom of Rhodesia. If they refuse, then their guild licenses will become temporarily invalid or may even be revoked. The fee for this task will be extremely high. Several more mercenaries will go with them. They will also provide you with the best equipment. A little later, they saw that the best equipment turned out to be an expensive carriage. One of their teammates was the captain of the Crimson Lion of Lyon. She said it was a strange quest. The merchants who need to be escorted do not have any cargo. She took this quest because they pay a lot for it. When she saw the guy with the servants, she went over to meet him. Behind her was her right arm, Bolts. Ryoma, while greeting him, noticed something that he did not have an arm. But the merchants had already approached them, noticing them. The merchant was not friendly. He was accompanied by only a couple of girls and one girlfriend. They didn't particularly inspire a sense of security in him. The guy didn't even understand who it was at the beginning, but the girls suggested that this was the one who submitted for this quest. The merchant turned his attention to the twins, immediately realizing that they were battle servants. And girls too, it's a rare sight. The man immediately noticed money in them. He said they could trust him and he would find them a better host. They should know that it's better for girls to stay in bed than to get out on the battlefield. The guy wasn't happy about it. With a malicious smile, he approached the merchant, offering to show him a secret otherworldly technique to consolidate their meeting. But this technique turned out to be just a massage. The merchant immediately relaxed and was very pleased. The guy started a pleasant conversation with him, but then told him that it was not very good to let a martial artist get behind him so easily. The merchant did not understand what he meant, but really dangerous people seem extremely harmless at first glance. He was clearly pointing at himself, and the merchant apparently understood this. He turned with a smile to the guy, saying that he was very well-mannered. But in fact, it is not so difficult for Remus to find out the secret thoughts of the merchant. He wrapped his arms around the man's neck and started asking if he was lying to them. Later, the whole team gathered around the campfire and he shared his idea that the merchant was lying with the others. He could tell by his pulse. It's probably a trap. Now Lionel understood why the man had grabbed him by the neck. But still, Ryoma did it because he doesn't like him. The problem is that they don't know who the target of all this is and what kind of trap awaits them. Her right-hand man asked if they should cancel this quest now. But she did not agree, because suspicion alone is not enough to cancel the quest. If anything happens to the guild's reputation, they will be blamed for it, and their licenses will be temporarily invalid or even revoked. At first glance, the adventurers seem to be free as the wind, only thanks to the support of the guild. Without her, it's not that they won't find a job, but it will be extremely difficult for them to simply leave the borders of the kingdom. Remo doesn't know why the merchant lied, but someone is clearly behind it and pulling the strings. And there is a possibility that he is a spy. And the chance that their target is Rema is extremely high. That sparkling carriage hinted at nobility. The girl asked if it was worth calling a few more people from the Crimson Lion, but the guy said that everything was fine. These are his problems. Besides, he doesn't want his comrades to lose their lives. The girl laughed. She said he was a really good guy or just dumb as a cork. He must understand that there is a chance that they, too, may be murderers seeking to take his life. The guy realized that this was the case. In that case, he'd better give up and die right away. The problem is that they don't know how to use carts, and he asked Sarah about it, entrusting it to her. They will always obey his orders, so he shouldn't always ask for it. Next, he asked Bolts to conjure something. A little later, when it was already very dark and everyone had set up tents, Liona came up to the guy. She remembered the moment when he said that the target was most likely himself. But what if she is the target? After all, she is the captain of a mercenary group. So if one of them dies, there shouldn't be any envy. She grabbed him by the breasts and pulled him very close to her, saying that when he talks to her, he can drop all suffixes. At that moment, the servant stood between them and the girl was upset because a kiss was quite an appropriate action at that moment. But they disagree because it was an unexpected attack. Liona found another way by inviting Remo to chat with them in the carriage while drinking. The twins forbade it, even if he agreed to it. After all, it is illegal to force a minor to drink alcohol by deception. Apparently, the guy did not understand Lion's intentions at all, so he did not understand what they were talking about, because he is always ready for a strategic meeting. And it's not that he can't drink. The girls were already tearfully asking the owner to keep his mouth shut. When it began to get light, they set off. Those who set up the trap believed that everything was going according to plan as they were informed. They came out of the royal forest. The scale of the group is great, so they definitely can't be wrong. The first order was for the archers to start shooting and the others to grab them when they split up. There is no need to kill. They must at all costs prevent the witch from crossing the border. At that moment, they launched an attack. The servants instantly shouted to the master and asked him not to get hit by arrows. Their plan is to accelerate and drive through them. Others also noticed that they were being chased by a cavalry unit. All the arrows were aimed at the carriage. After all, it was Ryoma who was the target. Was it really a gift from Ultomi? They let the merchants ride ahead. The guy shouted to Sarah that he had unhooked the cart and needed to try to stay straight. They need to take this chance and create distance. Unexpectedly, she shouted to everyone to look ahead. It turns out that the merchants also aimed their swords at them. They were surrounded on all sides. He had expected something like this, but in an instant, everything changed. The merchants and the attackers began to fight with each other. On less than a year ago, the battle between a group of merchants and the attacking enemies continued. Ryoma wondered what was going on and why they were fighting among themselves. Last night, a group of adventurers were sitting around a campfire when Ryoma said that they would be attacked tomorrow. But they would be at an advantage because they know that a trap has been set for them. Liona was surprised and asked how it would be useful for them. Ryoma looked at Lion and said that he was paraphrasing that they already knew that they had been set up a trap. Liona's assistant thought about it and said that whoever attacked first would get control. Ryoma agreed with the man. After thinking for a while, Ryoma decided to ask what would happen if they could identify the place where the attack would be. The mercenaries thought about it, and Ryoma said that they were still a group of mercenaries accompanying merchants to the Ridsyria and they were not wanted for crimes. And whether he or Lionel were the target, the enemy would commit a crime when attacking them. Ryoma remembered the merchant and said that the most effective way to trap a small detachment is an ambush. Thus they make the most of their geographical advantage. Liona's assistant asked if they could use this geographical advantage, and what would happen if the enemies chose a random location somewhere else. Ryoma assured the man that she did not think that they had come up with something else with a small group. Ryoma said that a strategist who cannot choose the best option will be condemned by others, and this will primarily affect morale. If someone has made a plan based on their mood, then others will not remain silent. The assistant turned to Lionel and asked if her ears didn't hurt, but the girl said she couldn't hear him. Ryoma pointed to the map, and Liona asked what would happen if they were attacked at night. Ryoma replied that this would not happen, because that way they could kill their own, and it would be difficult for them to recognize the target. Ryoma smiled and said that besides, only a fool would shout his name before attacking. When he finished speaking, he laughed. At the same time, in another place, the girl asked if Sato had caught a cold, but the guy said he was just talking to himself. The merchant pocket has arrived in the valley. Ryoma checked that they would be attacked in the valley next to the Rhodium. It would be bad if the enemy had magicians, and he did not think that they had anything against magicians. Ryoma and the servant were riding a horse. The guy shouted for the girl to just ride forward, and remembered that he assumed that stones and fire arrows would be thrown at them. The guy imagined the evil face of the bandit, and remembered to be careful when interacting with merchants. Liona said that if they weren't careful, they would be caught in a pincer. Ryoma said it would be good for them, and the girl asked why. The guy said that the tongs are good against an enemy who is as strong as you, but they must be stronger than these merchants. Ryoma rode his horse through the valley thinking that not only the enemies were here with a surprise. The guy remembered the plan that if they fell into the pincers, they would still need to fight their way through the ranks of merchants. The guy broke through the ranks of merchants. Overcoming them, he turned around and began to stop the horse. Ryota realized that this was their plan. Ryoma turned around and looked at the merchants. He did not understand what was happening. The merchants rode on, and Ryoma thought that the merchants were not enemies. Lina appeared next to him and asked if he was okay. Ryoma replied that he was fine and asked how she was doing. The girl said that several mercenaries had been killed, but her squad was fine, then asked if it was necessary to get the merchants out of the valley as planned. Ryoma shouted that they would act according to the plan and ordered Lionel to gather all the mercenaries together. The next moment, a group of mercenaries led by Rama rode into the thick of the action, where there were merchants and enemies. The guy on the horse appeared in the air and flew over the heads of people who followed him with their eyes. The soldiers of the attack smashed the carriage and shouted to the captain that it was empty. They were deceived and the witch escaped. Ryoma was watching the soldiers when the captain ordered them to follow her and not let her leave. The guy was surprised what kind of witch she was. Remus's squad rode into the gorge, and Liona said that he had deceived them well and they had received the bait. The guy said that even now he has doubts that everything is going according to plan. Liona said that everything that happens next will be on the shoulders of the bait, and she expects a lot from it. Ryoma thought about what happened last night and began to remember how a girl was sitting by a tree. Rora was sitting alone by a tree late at night when Ryoma came up to her and called her. The girl said that she was very sorry and she would start preparing for tomorrow right now. The guy calmed the girl down and said that he had not come for this, but had to say something important. Rora started crying and said that the owner wanted to drive her away. Rora said that because Ryoma hates war slaves and likes thin and soft girls, her muscles are disgusting. Ryoma tried to calm Rora down and said that her muscles were really good, but that's not what he came for. The guys were standing by the tree when Rora asked if she could do what only she could do. The guy said that this was what they discussed at the meeting, and he would leave the task of the final points of the plan to her. Ryota began to tell the plan that after they turn around and lure the enemies, they will be in a magic circle. The enemies will fall into a trap without knowing about it. And when he gives the signal, Rora must neutralize the enemies with her magic. Rora began to shine. She was inspired by the words that only she could do it and screamed that she would do everything possible. Whether there were hundreds or thousands of them, she would wipe them off the face of the earth. Ryota looked at the girl and said that the enemies would be on horseback. Rora said it would be problematic to use word magic on a fast enemy, and the chicken pox incision is not stable enough. The girl remembered the man's face and asked if she could help the wrestler, and Ryoma asked what she meant. The girl said that in terms of magic and battle, the wrestler would be stronger than her. The girl stood on the paradise of the rock, her hair fluttering in the wind. The girl nervously touched the finger on which the ring with the stone was worn. A man without an arm was standing behind the girl. A group of enemies chased the mercenaries. The knights shouted that they could not let the witch leave. The merchants shouted, "Kill them all and not one should leave alive." The mercenary asked what they should do because the merchants were also following them. Ryoma thought that the merchants would be blown away along with the enemies, but the merchants were not their enemies, but allies who were not sent to the empire. Ryoma decided that his targets were only those attacking them, and all he needed to do was use the carriage as bait. Ryoma thought that he had only to erase the traces of their presence. The guy decided that the merchants did not attack them directly, but became the initiators. Ryoma leaned over to Sarah and asked if she liked the main merchant. Sarah remembered how the merchant had said that she was a female combat slave, a rare specimen. The girl got angry and said that she hated the merchant. Rama asked Lionel about the merchant. The girl remembered the merchant's words that young girls are more in demand for bed than for the battlefield. Liona got angry and said she hated the merchant. Ryoma frowned. He started waving his hand and raised it up, then he started screaming. That was the signal for Rory. Stones appeared on the ground and Rory and the wrestler began a spell. Dear Mother Earth, create giant spears that can pierce everything. Hear your children, it's time to release anger, create a stone bamboo. The girl was standing on the edge of the cliff. A wall of stone bamboo formed behind the mercenaries, and Lionel shouted to check if there were any survivors. Ryoma found the face of a merchant among the stones who was furious. The guy was surprised and asked Masara if he was alive. The wrestler approached Rama and said the number of survivors had been counted. Ryoma was surprised by the treatment and thanked him for working quickly. The merchant shouted that they did not understand what they had done and how they could treat their customer in such a way. The men exchanged glances. Ryoma pulled out his sword and said that the merchants had not been a merchant since the beginning. The merchant shouted why he had drawn his sword. Ryoma said to silence the merchant. The merchant pointed his finger at the prisoner and said that it was necessary to kill the knights of the Rhodium who had launched this attack. The merchant shouted that they always want to be heroes, killing thousands of people without regret. They are stupid servants of the kingdom. Ryoma asked the merchant who he really was. The man said that he was a simple slave trader who had been trying to stop being a thief for a long time, and if Ryoma pardoned him, he would give in the price. Ryoma asked the merchant again who they were. The merchant shouted that Ryoma was an adventurer himself as a novice. Bort said that the merchant knows a lot and needs to get more information from his mouth. The merchant screamed and apologized for the deception. Ryoma said that for cheating, he could not complain about what would be done to him now. The hostage of the knights watched the situation and thought what was going on. They were chasing the witch because she would be dangerous in the future. Ryoma approached the prisoner, pointed at Rory and said that the next heir to the throne of the Rhodium, whom the captain of the Imperial Battles Mikoshiba was so looking for, was Rory. Ryoma approached the prisoner, pointed at Rory and said that the next heir to the throne of the Rhodium, whom the captain of the Imperial Battles Mikoshiba was so looking for, was Rory. High in the sky, an adult eagle flew over the captive knight and looked down. Clouds drifted across the clear sky. The prisoner was shocked and asked the girl her name. The girl stood in front of him with her hands joined together. After a while she introduced herself. Ryoma started talking to the man. Then he thought that it was dangerous to mention the girl's last name, as she might be recognized. Ryoma stood next to the girl and said that the girl's full name was Rory Mikoshiba. The girl stood nearby and was silent. The girl's face turned red after Ryoma said that he was her brother. The man asked in surprise that maybe Ryoma was her younger brother. Ryoma laughed and said that he was not her father either. The prisoner said that he had lost and asked to be executed quickly. Ryoma said he wouldn't kill him because he had no reason to do that right now. The man asked that he would kill him anyway when needed. Lyona said that they would decide later and that they were the ones who tried to kill them. The mercenary collected the bodies of the dead enemies in one place. The prisoner tensed when he heard Rem's words. He said that they were not enemies. The prisoner asked what Ryoma meant and if the nobles had not sent him. Ryoma pointed his finger at the prisoner and shouted that this was exactly the problem. Ryoma headed towards the side where the prisoner was sitting. Ryoma stood behind the man and said that the man should only answer the questions posed. Ryoma put a collar around the prisoner's neck when the man screamed and asked what he was doing. The guy said that he would not harm him and asked him to stand still, after which he called Sarah. The girl approached the prisoner and said that she would ask the questions. The man was surprised that Rory and she were twins. The girl asked if the captives' men were the guardians of the Road series. The girl asked the second question, why they attacked the trading group and whether it was because of the struggle for the throne. Then she asked the third question, was this an attack to protect the princess? The girl asked the fourth question if they were fighting the nobles under the queen. Then she asked the fifth question, that after the sudden death of the king, the first princess was supposed to enter the throne. The girl asked the sixth question, whether the nobles used the king's will as a shield to support the second princess. The prisoner was shocked. Ryoma thought that it was hard for them all to answer these questions. Sarah asked the last question and asked if the man the captain wanted to kill was Rory. After listening to all the questions, the prisoner looked down and frowned. Ryoma looked at the hand and said that everything fits together now. The girls who were standing nearby frowned and began to look at each other. Ryoma said that now the problem is what will happen next. Lyona said they were used as bait that was swallowed. The guy thought about it and said that most likely the guild master was playing a double game with them. Bortz suggested that they could complain to other guilds in the city. Lyona said it was a bad idea, they wouldn't believe them because there was no proof. Ryoma said if they took any chances they would be caught. Ryoma presented a beautiful room and said that if they managed to prove his involvement, then the chance of winning is not great yet. If you remember the look of Fulzard's gorgeous room, which suggests that accepting a bribe is not a problem for him. The girl put her hand to her face and said that Fulzard is the largest commercial city, and it is difficult to resist the authority and strength of the guild master in such cities. Ryoma looked up and thought about it. Ryoma began to smile and asked what Bortz thought of the merchant. The man bent down and began to reach for a small stick, lying on the ground. The man picked up the stick and began to examine it. The girl stood next to him and watched his actions in surprise. The man made an evil expression on his face and said that he could extract information from the prisoner. The surrounding people looked at him in fright. The prisoner looked at the backs of the guys. Then the man frowned and said that he did not want to take part in the discussion of the guys. The boys turned their gaze to the prisoner when he began to scream. The guys stood in silence and listened to the man screaming. The prisoner said that the real first princess is just a fake that was sent by the nobles, and the only legitimate heir to the crown is Lady Lupis. The lady was standing in the hallway of the estate and watching the courtyard from the window of the estate. Suddenly, the girl felt a premonition and remembered Mikko. Ryoma held up his finger and calmly said that the man was right. The man looked up at the guy and was surprised by his words. Ryoma said that everything is true and Rory is not the illegitimate child of the previous king and is not a princess. Rory is his companion, but she has an excellent pedigree. Sarah screamed that she was proof of that because they were twins. The prisoner did not believe the words when Ryoma said that they had deceived him, and the man shouted that he was deceiving him. Ryoma told the man to calm down and that he was trying to match the story of the merchant and the Knights of the Road series. The girl was sitting by the man's coffin. Ryoma began the story a few months ago, after the death of the king, when the first Princess Lupis was preparing for the coronation. A lot of people are sitting at a table and discussing something. Ryoma continued that information suddenly appeared that there was a girl with the same bloodline as the king from a neighboring country. Ryoma presented a map that divided the peoples and territories. Then the girl looked at the men. They were nobles. They were afraid of losing their power. A group of people were discussing something, and various flags and banners rose into the sky. Ryoma continued the story that meanwhile the knights were getting weaker. Ryoma held up his finger and began to talk about the features of the king's illegitimate child. The prisoner lowered his head to the bottom and closed his eyes. Ryoma thought that such a reckless plan, even if it had succeeded, would not have solved the essence of the problem. Ryoma said that he had no evidence, but while he was being persecuted, the illegitimate child was transported to another country. The prisoner was shocked by Rem's words. The guys began to look at each other and discuss the actions of the nobles. The girl looked at the guys in surprise. Ryoma closed his eyes and said that she was an illegitimate child. Rora stood next to him and smiled maliciously. Ryoma turned to the prisoner and they began to discuss the past battle and future plans. The male prisoner continued to get angry and scream. The prisoner clenched his teeth in anger. Rory and the dark-haired man started discussing one person. The guys looked at each other and fell silent. Ryoma turned around and looked at the man, then he began to move in the direction of the prisoner. Ryoma bared the edge of his blade. Ryoma approached the man, then he looked at the blade and said that the man, like them, was not in the best position. Ryoma cut the rope and freed the prisoner and offered him friendship. The man was shocked by Ryoma's words. The men stood opposite each other. A large eagle was flying across the clear sky, and after a while it appeared at the castle walls. There was a girl with the given hair in a large room. The room had large windows. The girl was walking through the room. Several people were in the room. They were on one knee and kneeling in front of the girl. The girl with long hair started saying that she had received a complaint about the captain, and it was not very good. The guys who were standing in front of the girl were very scared. Ryoma decides to raise her head and look at the girl. The girl stood right in front of Ryoma and looked at him warily. Late at night, in a forest clearing near the camp, the mercenaries decided to pass the time. Mikkel shouted, "How dare they mock the honor of a knight." Ryoma walked up to the camp and asked Rory what happened. The girl said that Mikkel and Lyona had quarreled. Lyona screamed about what honor can be said when he recently tried to kill them. The knight was confused and said he had no choice. Ryoma thought that the mercenaries were concerned about profit and the knights about moral values, so they could not get along. Lyona laughed and said that all knights are stupid, athletic men. Mikkel shouted for her to explain herself for her words. Rora put her hand to her face and began to discuss Lyona's statements with Rama. Ryoma explained everything, and Rora began to shine. The guys were inspired by this conversation. Then Rory came up to Sarah and started talking to her. Sarah put her hand to her face and said that her opinion would not change. Then Rora began to raise her hands up. Rora clenched her hands into a fist and screamed that she would believe in her. Sarah stood nearby and clapped her hands. The princess stood in front of the squad and told the vice-captain of the Imperial Battles, Mikkel, that she had received a report from Meltina, and it was too bad that they could not complete their mission. Ryoma realized that it was bad. Rory tried to say something to the guy, but he ordered her to shut up while the princess was talking. The guy looked around, and when asked what he thought about this situation, he said that everything looked dangerous and he knew it wouldn't help them. But the princess said it was a mission, which means she knows about the attack. The princess's expression was very serious. Ryoma watched the princess fight with other contenders for the throne. Ryoma looked at the girl and thought that she might be Meltina and thought that she was stupid, since she reported the failure of the mission. Because Mikkel is one of the few loyal subjects. The princess told Mikkel that his failure had claimed the lives of many knights who had given their lives for the good of the kingdom. But despite this, their captain was sitting here alive and well. The girl said that as the princess of the kingdom, she had no choice but to execute the captain, but it was a cunning trap of the nobles, and therefore the execution was postponed. Mikkel squeezed his eyes shut. Ryoma looked ahead and thought that this was what they were thinking about in the castle. There was a blonde girl behind Ryoma. Negotiations began in the crowd of subjects, and Ryoma noticed how one of the men was unhappy. The princess said she would give a chance to redeem herself and asked if there was anything to say to the captain. Mikkel shouted that he would no longer disappoint Her Highness. Sarah and Rory started a conversation when one girl said that it all sounds like you should be executed, but you're safe now. Ryoma thought that Lupis did not say about the attack, no information about the operation, but only said about the trap of the nobles, who killed the knights and looked at the situation from a different angle, found a benefit for herself. Now I know what she is capable of. The princess turned abruptly and said that they needed to continue the conversation, but on a different topic. Ryoma thought that now he knows what the princess is capable of. The princess continued and ordered Rory to get up, and asked if it was true that she was not the daughter of King Falst II of Rhodesia. The princess looked at Rory warily and couldn't take her eyes off her. Rory stood in front of the princess and looked at the floor. Rory said that everything is as Her Majesty said, and her name is Rora Malfist. Ryoma stood next to Rory and looked at her in surprise. Then Rory went on to say that her sister was standing next to her. The girl looked at Rory in surprise. The princess was surprised by Rory's words. The princess was puzzled and said that she had heard about this family before, somewhere in the central continent. The princess's assistant said that the illegitimate child does not have a sister. The princess turned her wary gaze back to the girls, who were standing and nervously staring in front of them. Then the princess smiled and closed her eyes. The princess put her hands together, and after a while she said that now everything became clear to her. Then the princess opened her eyes and said with a smile that she wanted to show something to the guys. Ryoma looked at the princess, then at his friends. It became dark outside, and bright stars began to appear in the dark sky. There was an unusual vase on a table in one of the rooms of the fortress. Ryoma asked what it was. The girl said that the guy would take it as an apology for his capture because there are disagreements within the country. The guys sat down at the table, and the princess said that this thing was very valuable. Ryoma said that he had an offer for Mikkel to join their army. Ryoma said that, looking at the current situation, the chance of the first princess winning is 0. Suddenly, Princess Meltina's assistant got angry and ran at the guy with the sword. It seemed to her that Ryoma's insulting words. The girl was next to Ryoma. She bared her blade and put it to Ryoma's neck. Ryoma calmly looked at the sharp blades. Then the girl screamed about how such a commoner dares to say such things because he is not even allowed to be here. The princess told Meltina to put the sword away. Meltina was indignant, but after a few seconds she put the sword away when the princess said that everything was fine and she still owed Ryoma. After which she apologized to the guy and continued the conversation. Ryoma said that they would be a good addition to their strength if they joined the knights. The princess laughed and asked why Ryoma felt that way. The guy pointed a finger at himself and calmly declared that he would be able to bring victory. The princess and her assistant looked at the guy in surprise. The princess laughed and said that the guy had a lot of confidence, then asked if she could believe that he would justify these words. Ryoma said that he would fully prove the charm of their deal. The guy said it was all settled now. Sarah picked up the precious vase, as suddenly Ryoma was surprised that the girl had heard everything. The girl reached for the vase and said that everything was decided. The guys looked at the girl in surprise. Rora started calling for Sarah. The girl held a vase in her hands and said that they needed finances to help the princess win. The guys looked at each other and began to smile. The princess said that Remus has a faithful slave. It was finally night outside. Sarah and Ryoma returned to the mercenary room. Lina called out how it had gone and added that she was waiting for them for a long time, because if they hadn't returned she would have had to deal with fine, royal drinks. The girl was examining the glass. Bort said that Lina believed in Remus and was waiting in the room. The girl screamed at the guy not to say too much. Ryoma thanked Lyona. Lyona screamed that she did not need gratitude. She decided so herself and stopped calling her by her status, because she had already talked about it and they had already become comrades. Ryoma agreed and said he wanted to ask something. The girl started pointing at Rama and saying that she asked not to call her that because they are comrades and she has another question. This surprised Ryoma. Ryoma said that he wanted to hire mercenaries and besides the Crimson Lion, he needed another 100 people. Lyona was surprised by this figure and asked if they were needed right now because, including stocks, 300 gold pieces were needed. Ryoma clarified that they needed 300 gold pieces and said that tomorrow she would ask Rory to prepare the money and asked Lyona to gather to find mercenaries. The guys finished the conversation, then they each had a carved glass in their hands, which were filled with a drink. The imperial capital of Oltomai, at the castle, Sato asked why he should leave the capital. The man replied that he was leaving tomorrow because it was time to decide the fate of the road series. Two feudal lords met in a commercial city. Count Bergston shouted that he looked pretty good despite his age. Count Zelf replied that he had not received such a guest for a very long time. Meltina appeared next to the men. The men were sitting at the festive table when the count alone said that Meltina had arrived faster than he expected. Another count said that she came before the evening bell and he won the bet. Now the bottle of drink is his. The dark-haired girl stood and said that she wanted to help the guys, so she ran away from the palace. A glass with a drink appeared in the girl's hand. The girl said that, after she received a message that she was expected at Count Bergston's castle, she ran out of the palace to get here. Sarah and Rory were laughing behind the girl's back when she screamed what they were doing. The dark-haired man sarcastically said that in the war for the throne, they decided to support the princess. A blonde man was sitting next to her. Meltina looked at the men, a glass of drink in her hands. After a couple of seconds, a scream was heard all over the house. Meltina shouted that two major aristocrats had decided to remain neutral, finding themselves joining the knightly and noble faction. Two who had rejected offers so many times finally decided to join. Ryoma stood in a fighting position and reached for the sword that hung on his back. Behind him were his friends and the faces of influential people. Count Bergston said that maybe he was too hasty in his decision, and Count Zelf added that straight. And Meltons are nothing but straight, and the guy makes him sober up. Meltina asked Remus if he hadn't convinced the counts that showing gratitude and respect for the rightful heir was the right thing to do. Remus stated that he did not, because the two counts agreed to the request of the noble faction to remain neutral in order to obtain lands and positions of ministers. Meltina asked where they got this information from because she hadn't heard anything like that. Ryoma said he had connections with the noble faction, and he asked them to serve under the command of Princess Lupis. Ryoma thought that the honor guard does not need to fight on the front line. The feudal lords will join the royal guard. There is also no better offer for the feudal lords. Ryoma said that he knows Meltina's talent and her strong devotion to the royal family. Standing on the front line is the most noble act for her. But that's because she is a knight. But for others, everything is different. Ryoma put quiet fields and said that after the war they did not receive any awards. People could not accept this. In fact, people on the battlefield are their people. Ryoma introduced the Civil War, and he began to talk further about his intentions. The blonde man put his hand to his face and listened to Rama. Ryoma looked at the Count and said that the two of them would not be linked by any military authorities. The Count said that this deal was attractive, and he almost went down the path and was close to becoming a fool in politics for the next decades. The Count said that to take the position of minister simply, by opening his mouth and remaining neutral was too good an offer and frankly. Meltina asked why it was impossible to contact General Godram. Suddenly, Sarah screamed that they now have this expensive vase and this is their best deal. Late in the evening at the manor, Ryoma met a girl in the hallway. The girl said that she was Meltina and his slaves, and the Count's maids forced her to change into this one. Meltina said she didn't understand how he trained his slaves. Ryoma apologized that his family had inconvenienced her. The girl said that everything was fine and what had just happened was important. The girl asked if it could be that Ryoma is using a neutral faction to create a third direction of power. The faction of nobles, the faction of knights, and the faction of the princess. Meltina said that this happened in a far country, which is now divided into three. Although it seems that the general supports the princess to become the next king, it will be bad if he holds all the armed forces of the Rhodium in his hands. Ryoma said it was hard to understand Godram's intentions. Looking at his attitude towards how the princess treated Mikkel, you can't tell about his submission to the princess. So if they defeat the faction of nobles and knights, they still need to be careful. Count Bergston appeared in the corridor and Remet turned to him and said that was why he wanted to strengthen the princess's power a little. The Count agreed and told Ryoma to leave the gathering of neutral nobles to him. Ryoma said that there were still missing details. Let's say the military strength of the two counts is 2,000, but he would still like 2,000 more on top or a talented person who could compete with Godram. Count Zelf appeared in the corridor and said that if Rama was looking for a talented person, he knew where to find him and gave the name of Mrs. Alina Steiner, who was the previous commander-in-chief. Ryoma thought about it and asked if Alina was from the royal family. The Count said she was from the common people. Ryoma was surprised that she was a woman and asked why she was called a lady if she was from the common people. The Count said that they respected her, her achievements, her dignity, her abilities in martial arts, and with her talents, she went from peasants to a general and became a saint. But one day she announced her retirement as a national hero. Meltina said that hearing about the feud between Alina and Godram, with the general on the princess's side, it would be hard to call Alina to help us. Ryoma thought about the feud and asked what could be done about her sudden resignation. Sometime later, at Lady Alina's estate, the servant said that they had visitors and asked what she should do. The lady said that there had been no guests for a long time and asked them to invite them. The mistress, Rama, and Meltina were sitting at the table when the guy thought that the mistress looked like an economy. Suddenly, Meltina shouted that she was glad to meet the lady and introduced herself as Meltina Lester. She is a samurai princess, and it is an honor to meet the lady today. Mrs. Alina and Rama started talking about him. Ryoma mentioned the old nickname of the lady. She drooped and was displeased when she heard Remus' words. The woman asked the reason for the guy's arrival to her. The guys looked at each other, and Ryoma said that he had a conversation with the lady. Ryoma stated that he wanted to ask the lady to help Princess Lupis in the war. Meltina told the guy not to speak so suddenly. The lady was surprised by Remus's suggestion. The lady asked if they offered to join the Knights faction, and she is not against it, but does not want to unite with Godram. The lady asked the guests if they had listened to the rumors. Meltina remembered that the lady's husband and child had been abducted by Godram. Ryoma stated that he knew and therefore asked the lady to be the princess's personal advisor. Ryoma looked in front of him and said that they would have some conditions. The lady was surprised by Rem's words. The dark-haired girl smoked in her head the conditions that Ryoma was talking about. The guys looked at each other and started talking discontentedly. Ryoma asked to leave them alone with the lady. The lady laughed and said that if Ryoma was surprisingly sensitive. The dark-haired girl got up from her chair and left. The woman took a sip from the cup and continued the conversation with Rama. Ryoma asked the reason why the woman was trying to refrain from making a decision. Ryoma looked at the lady and asked her about her husband. The woman frowned and began to recall the events of the past. The woman began the story. Some time ago, she returned home and was horrified by what she saw. The young woman's hair was loose. There was a ladder in front of the woman. She was covered in blood, and a dark-haired man's head was lying on it. Tears appeared in the woman's eyes and she began to hug the man's head. After a while, the woman read the letter. It described the abduction of her daughter. To save her daughter, the woman renounced the knightly order. Ryoma and the woman were sitting opposite each other. Ryoma asked about the duke's name. Then he put his hand to his face as he went into shock. Ryoma looked at the woman carefully. She put her hands together and said through a smile that Ryoma had to promise her something. Rama and Meltina left the manor when the girl said that the princess would be happy and that she was worried about what might happen. The girl asked why he looked sad, even though Alina had agreed to become his ally. Ryoma looked at the woman warily, then he said he was wondering what happened to her daughter. The woman bowed her head and frowned. The woman began to remember and tell that her daughter had been sold into slavery. Ryoma got up from the table, said goodbye to the woman and left. The lady watched the carriage from the window and said that the young man was keeping quiet because he shed tears for her and her daughter. The servant said that the guy looked older than his age. The lady laughed and said that the guy shed tears for her and her daughter. He also looks older than his age. A maid stood behind the woman. The woman smiled and said that Ryoma is filled with youth and talent, shines with strength and intelligence. He is the light that she needs so much after a long stay in the darkness of despair. He is a light that shines despite his age. In the throne room, the warrior said whether the emperor would allow 30,000 people to be taken to defeat China. The emperor asked what the warrior's plan was if his enemies were far away and the number of soldiers was small. Ryoma was reading a book on the lap of a blonde girl. She straightened her hair and said it was time. Ryoma stood up and said he was sorry for using her as a pillow. The girl looked at him and said that he had nothing to apologize for. The slave was standing at the well and taking water when she remembered Rama and thought that the guy was apologizing to her, even though she was a slave, whom he could treat as he wished. Lionel crept up to the girl and scared her, after which she said that the girl's defense was full of holes. The girl screamed in fright. The girl said that it was not nice to do that. Liona laughed and said she couldn't pass by while she was so distracted and asked where Rama was. Liona laughed and said that she understood everything. She then praised the girl for finding so many fighters to work with. Liona adjusted her hood. Then the girls started laughing and discussing that they supported the princess and did not intend to back down. Liona asked the girl where her sister was, and the girl said that Rama had instructed her to find Russian books in the castle and Sarah should be somewhere in the corridors. Liona asked if it was okay to leave her alone and not turn into a merchant with a vase. The girl shouted that she was not and was now taking on water. Liona said Rory is a combat magician and should do what the people in the castle say, not draw water. The girl said that she was Mr. Rem's slave and should be able to carry out any orders to the best of her ability. Liona started talking about Remus. The blonde girl blushed and began to feel very embarrassed. Liona stepped aside and laughed. Liona asked if this was Rem's indication and what it was like for him. The girl hesitated and began to say something incomprehensible. Suddenly Rory burst into tears and said that it was all wrong and because of his kindness it was hard for her, and she had a feeling that Ryoma did not trust them. Liona was scared and apologized, saying she had gone too far and asked what Rory was talking about. Rory said that even if she asked Remus to treat her badly. Angry Sarah appeared next to her and screamed that Liona had made her sister cry. Liona, frightened, asked the girl to wait and that she misunderstood everything. The sister asked what happened, but Sarah screamed that there was a problem and Remus could be killed right now. Ryoma engaged in a duel with one of the mercenaries. The mercenary shouted that now he would not have to fight with Ryoma when he was half asleep. The sisters were running through the streets of the city when Sarah screamed that Remus was having a duel with a Class A mercenary who possesses magical art. The girls turned back and began to deny everything, screaming. There were tears in the eyes of one of the girls. She was drooping and worried about Rama. The mercenary shouted that the rumors that Ryoma couldn't use magic turned out to be true and swung at the guy again. The mercenary became enraged and jumped to attack when he shouted that an F-rank adventurer would be unable to do anything against him. The mercenary landed on the ground and cracks appeared all over the ground from the impact. Ryoma landed nearby and continued to tease the fighter. Ryoma said that the mercenary's magic art is impressive. The man laughed and told Ryoma not to be distracted. But Ryoma said that the mercenary is just frustrating the forces and relies a lot on his magic art. The mercenary ran at Remus when the guy laughed and said if the mercenary would cry from this. Ryoma dodged several blows from his opponent and knocked him to the ground. The fighter was very surprised. Ryoma repelled the fighter's attack and applied a grapple. A second later, the firing pin flew to the ground. There was an explosion. The rest of the mercenaries were shocked by what happened, but Ryoma said that these were skills and well-known techniques in Rias. The sisters ran to the training ground and called Remus, but the wrestler appeared and said he would not miss them. The man looked at the crowd of mercenaries and said that this was a duel between warriors, and he would not let anyone through, even if they were sisters. The girls were scared when Lionel came running and shouted to the wrestler that she could not detain them. The girls yelled at her because she knew about the rule. The mercenary was angry, got up from the ground and said that heavenly techniques, then he knows one technique. Ryoma shouted that he should show one then. Ryoma held out his hand in front of him and took a fighting pose. Then he invited the man to continue the battle. The man's hand began to burn. The mercenary got to his feet and his body was suffused with magical flames and asked if this was not a heavenly technique, which is very useful and is called karate. The mercenary shouted that he was using Rem's specialty. Girls appeared in the crowd of mercenaries when Ryoma got angry and told the mercenaries not to put their skills on a par with his and his grandfather's skills. The mercenary got angry. After a moment he was next to Ryoma, the man began to attack the guy, but Ryoma managed to short himself. Then Ryoma got close to the man. He attacked the man and grabbed him by the neck and immobilized his arm. A moment later, Ryoma completes her attack and the man is on the ground. The man clenched his teeth hard from the blow. The men exchanged glances. The crowd of mercenaries shouted that this was Ryoma Mikoshiba's victory. Ryoma raised his hands in honor of the victory. The guy said that his opponent could have died like that. The wrestler laughed and said that he would take care of everything. The sisters ran up to the guy and shouted what was going on. Ryoma said that he did not warn about this. He decided to get rid of the enemy in a duel, and asked Lyona to help him when he found out that the killer disguised himself as a mercenary in a training camp. Rory got upset and screamed that they could get rid of the killer if they found out about him. Ryoma said that he kept it a secret because he expected such words from her. Lyona pointed at the mercenaries and said that this was the fastest way to unite the mercenaries around Remus so that he could lead them, and now they are all discussing him. Ryoma went into the crowd of mercenaries to rejoice together. Lyona looked at Rory and told her to start trusting Rema more. The girl's face turned very red from embarrassment. The girl stroked Rory's hair and told her to worry secretly, and she would keep the secret. Ryoma stood in the crowd of men and accepted congratulations. Lyona said she would reveal another secret, and if Ryoma is happy now, but he has already made a decision if he dies. He wants the girls to live a normal life. Lyona said she had asked about it many times, but Ryoma said if they interrupted him, it would be a big factor in his duel. Ryoma called a girl from the crowd of mercenaries and shouted at her not to say anything superfluous. Lyona said that both girls are dear to the guy. Rory laughed and told Lyona not to lie because she was a slave and she didn't need to be loved. Lyona looked at her comrades and how the mercenaries rejoiced at the duel, after which Ryoma told Rory that the war was just beginning. Ryoma smiled and looked at the girl. Roro looked down at the bottom. Nearby in the room, someone was watching the guys. Ryoma and the blonde girl walked side by side. Ryoma was scratching his neck in embarrassment, and the girl walked beside him and smiled broadly. A girl with blonde and disheveled hair was looking at the man's hand, which began to reach out to her. The girl was sitting in the corner of the street, surrounded by a crowd of people. Nearby on the ground, there was a bucket of spilled water. In the meeting room, the aristocrat knelt in front of the lady. The man said that his grandfather Frank was worried and often asked about Mrs. Alina's health, and from now on, they can use it as they wish. The man bowed when Ryoma asked if Alina knew him. The lady said that he was the grandson of Frank Morrigan, the former right-hand man, who was also born a commoner like herself. The surrounding people put a blonde man on a horse. There was a girl standing next to Ryoma, and she said that unless a knight can be called ugly. The men who were in the room began to discuss the number of allies who could join them. Ryoma thought that Godrem was arrogant and stubborn, as he had heard that he did not neglect discrimination and inhuman cruelty, and I assumed that the man was not popular from the very beginning. Ryoma thought that if everything continued and their faction gained strength and became stronger, then it would force the general to do something about it. Note 8: it's too late for this and there will be no choice but to solve the logistics problem as quickly as possible. Ryoma thought that they were still considered the Imperial Guard under the direct control of the princess, not a regular army, and unlike General Godram's regular troops, they had their own problems. Meltina ran into Mrs. Alina's office and screamed that they had problems. The men looked at the girl in surprise. The dark-haired girl was all red. She started shouting that one of the nobles had betrayed them and defected to the enemy. The men looked in surprise in the direction where the dark-haired girl was standing. She was shouting that enemies had broken into the territory. The man thoughtfully put his hand to his chin and began to discuss rumors about the nobles with others. Rema and Alina became more wary. The count clenched his hand into a fist and slammed it on the table, then he began to scream and resent the betrayal. The girls looked at the man in surprise. Ryoma found himself on the street. He recalled a conversation with a dark-haired girl. Ryoma began to think about a possible betrayal. Ryoma remembered the warlords and thought that the nobles and the army had too bad interaction, how they were going to win the war. Ryoma put his hand to his chin and thought about fighting. Alina appeared behind him, smiling. Remus was worried about the woman's calmness. Ryoma stood at the railing and looked into the distance. He said they might have problems if they died. Alina agreed with Rama. The lady said if the war was attrition, then their logistical problems would be solved by raiding the supply line of Godram's army. Ryoma agreed and said that the war of attrition would not hit them, but he was very worried about it. The mistress said that if she died of natural causes tomorrow. The guy asked the woman not to joke like that and said that the worst thing that bothers him in this war is if the mistress suddenly leaves him. The mistress said that Ryoma knows that she hates men who give false hope. Ryoma asked if they contained victory in this war if he could ask for one favor. The Council of War met at the castle. Meltina jumped up from the table and shouted that Ryoma was crazy if he decided to send mercenaries to attack. The enemy has more than 60,000 soldiers at his disposal, and this without adding Godram's troops. The people gathered at the table were violently immersed in discussions. Ryoma was unhappy with the dark-haired girl's offer. Count Bergsten said that it was a strong blow to them when Godram joined Gerhardt's forces. But it is difficult for these two armies to become one, so now is a good opportunity to build a fort on the front line. The Count said that at the place where the armies have to cross the river, they will be able to build a fort on the river, and if they can take advantage of terraforming, they will be able to build an impregnable fort. The Count shouted that Remus had an ingenious strategy. Ryoma wondered what he expected from the Count, that he was just an ordinary muscular guy like the others, but this was not the case. Ms. Alina said that the plan was intriguing and asked how Ryoma was going to build fortifications on the water. Even if the enemy forces did not know about the plan, they would definitely notice the construction. Ryoma got up from the table and said that he had a separate plan for this, and asked if the princess would approve it. The princess was confused, and said that she did not understand anything about military affairs, and would leave the decision-making to Mrs. Alina. The lady realized that Ryoma knew in advance that the princess would leave the decision-making to her, even when he had just brought her. Alina got up from her chair and looked at the princess, then she said that her plan was very good. The princess smiled back at the woman. The woman closed her eyes and said that she had accepted this plan only because of her trust in Ryoma. Ryoma was surprised by the redneck's praise. The lady said that this strategy was good for them. If the plan failed, then they would only lose Ryom's mercenaries and asked Ryom to try not to die. Late in the evening at the princess's castle, Lyona asked if Ryoma was ready to take a risky step and send mercenaries to the front line. The wrestler asked how the guy was going to defend himself from enemy attacks. The only thing they heard was Rem's plan. The guys gathered in the room and began to carefully study the papers, and also discuss the recruitment of new mercenaries. The girl introduced the bandits and asked if they needed to steam with them. Ryoma said that it was necessary to leave them for now, and based on the situation they could become trump cards. Ryoma said they might give them some false information. The wrestler asked if everything would be all right and if they would try to kill him while he was sleeping. Ryoma laughed and tried to justify himself. Lyona shouted that the only thing to do was to sleep with him every night and then they would do two things at the same time. The girls were unhappy. Leona said it was just a joke. The girls continued to swear loudly. Ryoma stood nearby and watched the girls with a smile, then he looked out the window with concentration. Fluffy clouds floated across the bright sky. The castle was located on a hill and the city was located below it. The horses were breathing heavily and Ryoma was sitting astride one of them. Ryoma stopped and looked at the many soldiers who stood in front of him. After a while, an army of mercenaries led by Rama arrived outside the walls of the capital city of Xerius. Nearby, Lyona was sitting on a horse. Count Bergsten took up positions next to his troops. The soldiers kept a close eye on their leaders. Ryoma held up his hand and bided his time. Ryoma was sitting on a horse with a blonde girl. He raised his hand and shouted that it was time for them to move out. A few days later, Ryoma and his companions stood at the cliff and looked at the winding mountain river. The mercenary army is located on the southern bank of the Phoebe River. People established a military camp and were preparing to build a fort. Count Bergsten shouted to Remus that he was going to explore the area with a small detachment. Ryoma said that this was only a reconnaissance of the area, and if they met the enemy, they should immediately retreat. The men started talking and smiling at each other. The Count jumped on his horse and rode off. Ryoma stared at him intently, then several more horsemen appeared in front of him, one of whom nodded to Ryoma as a greeting. Ryoma approached the mercenary squad and shouted for them to continue preparations, as they had planned before. Ryoma and the rest of his friends were swimming across the river. People were holding onto the horses. On the other side of the river, there was a forest and high mountains. Bortz took out the notes on the plan and shouted for the first squad to get ready. The man told the wine not to worry, and if he did everything as in practice, then there would be no problems. Magic has begun the spell. Hear me, Spirit Lord of the Earth. We are the ones who have received your blessing. Hear our call and change your shape into an earthen slide. The ground rose and a pit formed. The wrestler said that this was enough and sent the first squad to prepare their magic for a break, then called the second squad to their starting position. Ryoma looked at the pit and said that the work was excellent and we need to continue in the same spirit. Bortz asked that Ryoma was still surprised by the work. Ryoma said that there is nothing special. This magic is not used in offensive magic against a moving enemy, that this spell is easy to reset with magic items. The wrestler was delighted when Ryoma said that magic was more effective to use in this way. But the guy did not understand what amused the man. Bortz thought that the young master did not yet realize how valuable he was. Ryoma looked to the side and asked the wrestler if the mercenary related to what they had discussed earlier. Ryoma watched as the girl and the other mercenaries were preparing the camp, and thought that she might be from the Ultomai Empire, or maybe these guys were going somewhere in the near future. Ryoma looked to the side. There were mercenaries and they were lifting a log. Ryoma thought that these mercenaries must be from the Ultomai Empire. A detachment of scouts settled on the cliff and one soldier said that there was no hint of movement, but the number was about 5,000 people and included 2,000 horsemen. The count looked at the enemy troops and said that there were too many of them, and most likely they also had scouts who had already figured out their plan to cross the river. The soldier told the count that in such a case, they urgently need to inform Mr. Mikoshiba about everything. The count said that this was the right decision and ordered everyone to retreat. Suddenly, the soldier shouted for the captain to wait and said that the enemy general might rather be who he was thinking of. Mikkel asked what the soldier was trying to say. The man pushed the soldier aside and took the binoculars from him. The captain was shocked when he aged through binoculars and saw an enemy general, whom he recognized as Kyle Arunia. The soldiers got angry when they realized that this was the same traitor Kyle, and asked what they should do now. Mikkel took out his sword and said that now everything is obvious what needs to be done, and ordered the soldiers to retreat and report everything to Mr. Remus. Mikkel rushed to the traitor on a horse and shouted for the soldiers to return to the camp and tell everything to Remus. The warriors tried to say that they would not leave the captain alone, but the man shouted that Kyle had no forgiveness for his sin. Fluffy clouds floated across the bright sky and a bird with long wings circled high in the sky. Ryoma was looking into the distance. He was very wary. Ryoma and the girl were standing by a high fence. It was in the process of being built. The girl was worried about Ryoma's condition. He replied that he was fine. A wrestler appeared to the side and shouted that he had news for the young master. Ryoma shouted what happened and ran up to the wrestler. Bortz was holding a wounded soldier when Rama realized that it was one of the scouts who had left with Mikkel. Ryoma caught the scout in his arms. There were arrows in his back. Ryoma shouted for the soldier to get ready and tell them what happened to them if they went to investigate. The soldier fell to the ground and said that they had gone to investigate, but Mikkel and the other soldiers were most likely all destroyed. The wrestler asked that since they faced the enemy, Mikkel was killed in the fight. The soldier said that Mikkel went to the hordes of the enemy when he saw Kyle. The mercenary army began to whisper that the traitor Kyle had appeared. Ryoma thought about who it was and was horrified. 334. The man gathered his strength and said that the number of followers of the enemy was unknown. After hearing the words, Ryoma frowned. Ryoma turned around and started calling Lion. The girl looked at Ryoma in fright. He said they needed reinforcements. A dark-haired man and a girl stood next to Ryoma and a wounded soldier. The soldier grabbed Ryoma by the clothes and began to beg. Ryoma asked if it was someone who was related to the knight, and the wrestler demanded what size the enemy's army was. The soldier said 5,000, and the number of pursuing soldiers is unknown. The soldier called Remus and asked his forgiveness for the fact that they ignored him, ordered. Ryoma reassured the soldiers and said that it was not his fault, because their commander ignored the order, which means he should not blame himself. The soldier said that this was wrong. Commander Mikkel followed the order at first, but when he saw the traitor Kyle Urunia as a commander in the face of the enemy, he lost his composure. The soldier apologized for not being able to stop the commander, and now he is ashamed to call himself a knight. As a knight protecting Mrs. Lupis, he is ready to sacrifice his own life for Mrs. Lupis, and is sure that Commander Mikkel is the same. The soldier said that he wanted to be like Commander Mikkel. The guy tore the medal from his chest and said that he had not received anything else besides this medal. Ryoma frowned and looked into them. Then he looked at the girl and she waved her head at him in response. The girl and Ryoma were sitting on the ground next to the wounded soldier. There was blood and beads of sweat on the man's face, and he frowned. The soldier introduced the princess's face and asked Remus that he should promise that he would make Princess Lupis the queen of the Rhodesia. The soldier died on the ground from his wounds. Ryoma was sitting at the table with the body of a soldier lying next to him. The girl looked at Rome but said nothing. Ryoma started calling the wrestler's name loudly. Ryoma asked Rory to give him some time, and the girl said that he could rely on her. After some time, Ryoma stood at the soldier's grave. He remembered the princess's face and thought that he needed to make the princess a queen. Remus's face was gloomy. He was looking at his hand, which held the medal. After a while, Rory began to praise him. Rory was standing on the tower when she shouted that the enemy was approaching them, and that 5,000 soldiers were 1 kilometer in front of them. Ryoma stuck his sword into the soldier's grave, clutched the medal in his hand and thought that before he could fulfill his promise, he must survive. General Kyle's army approached the Phoebe River, and the man shouted how his opponent was able to build such fortifications in such a short time. Men on horseback discussed a plan of action as well as drew a plan to capture enemy territories. They had 3 options for attacking. Kyle shouted how he should now carry out Duke Gerhardt's order. The assistant said that they could not evade the order just because of these problems. The assistant asked Mr. Kyle what the next step was. The man said that they only had to prepare for a full-fledged direct attack. Kyle said that according to the data, the enemy has almost 2,000 soldiers, but our forces are larger than that, and therefore we will show the enemy that their homemade channel will not help them survive. Kyle turned to the army and shouted that he gave them the word of Duke Gerhardt and everything they plundered from the enemy would be theirs, so spare no effort. General Kyle thought that he definitely wouldn't lose. The assistant reported that everything was ready for the attack. The man drew his sword and shouted for the army to run to the attack. The enemy army was approaching the walls of the fort. Coeur d'Armor received the news that enemy soldiers were allowed to loot in this civil war. Lyona and her soldiers took up a position on the walls of the fortifications. The archers prepared arrows, and the girl shouted that they should listen to her order and not take a step back. The enemy army approached the walls of the fort, and Lyona shouted for the first detachment to open fire with an arrow. Hundreds of arrows descended from the sky on the opponents, and they began to retreat. Kyle's assistant shouted at them to keep advancing. There are not many enemies and they can destroy them. General Kyle rode into the center of the army and shouted that everyone would attack if they needed gold. Lyona looked at the enemies and thought that they had poor equipment and how they were going to defeat them with recruits alone. Lyona shouted for the second squad to open fire. A barrage of arrows rained down on the enemy soldiers. The surviving soldiers began to approach the gate. Lyona ordered the third squad to prepare, and the soldiers took their spears. The girl shouted for the soldiers to pierce through the enemies, and from the holes in the wall spears hit the enemies. Kyle watched the army and thought how useless the soldiers were. Why couldn't they break down the defenses if, according to the spy's report, they were several times superior to the enemy's army? The assistant shouted to Mr. Kyle that in this situation they would not advance anywhere, and they needed to retreat in order to organize a new formation. Kyle shouted in rage that they had more soldiers and they should not retreat. Why couldn't they overwhelm the enemy with numbers? Because there were only peasants there. The assistant said that the resistance at the south gate is extremely strong, and without a mount they will not be able to break the wall. She got a punch from Kyle for saying that. Kyle shouted that he was going to the front line and called on the soldiers to break down the central gate. The soldiers were ready to carry out the order. Ryoma stood on the tower of the fort and watched as their enemy began to move. The guy thought that he expected the enemy to retreat by this point, but is it normal for a knight of the kingdom to make such risky moves? Ryoma thought that the commander had decided to end this skirmish once and for all. But what makes this knight so impatient? Ryoma asked the soldier if he knew anything about Kyle, and the guy replied that he was a lying, selfish, and cowardly person. He was forever looking down on everyone and using his followers to bully knights who disliked him. The soldier got angry and said that this was a traitor, a disgrace to the knights, who deceived former comrades who believed in him and in the mission to protect the kingdom. Ryoma calmed the guy down and said that he understands how the knights hate this traitor, but he does not need to hear a wave of indignation at the expense of this man. But in short, Kyle is a very slippery person. Ryoma thought that after such a sad description, Kyle did not seem to him like a man who would dispose of his powers like this, because in the end he renounced the master he had served for so long. Ryoma introduced Kyle, and since he betrayed his comrades, with whom he was both in sorrow and in joy, for the sake of the spearhead of Duke Gerhardt's faction, and now he stands before us as the general of the enemy forces. Ryoma called Rory and shouted that they needed to use something ahead of the time they had planned and asked her to get ready. Rory asked if it was necessary to use the attack now. The assistant shouted to Kyle that they had discovered smoke in the center of the fortress, and soon they would be able to break through their wall. Kyle ordered this message to be sent to all forces, after which he shouted that their army had broken through the wall and ordered everyone to attack. Lyona held her hand out in front of her and was giving orders on the fortress wall when Kyle's army appeared on horseback in front of the bridge. Enemy soldiers were getting close to the walls of the fortress, and enemy archers were hitting the mercenaries on the walls. Ryoma shouted for the soldiers to hold on a little longer. Kyle galloped to the gate and shouted why the army was not in the fortress yet. The soldiers were trying to climb the fortress wall. Kyle looked at Remus and wondered if their commander was the same hiding adventurer. He looked so cocky standing at the forefront of the attack. Ryoma shouted to send a signal to Lionel and the wrestler. The soldier raised his bow and fired a fiery arrow. A fiery environment rose above the camp, and the mercenaries saw the order. Boru shouted to the Crimson Lion mercenaries to see their true power, which controlled them all the time. Bartz turned and shouted that the enemies should see their strength. Liona's face turned red, and she was preparing to attack. The soldiers looked at the guys in fright. Lyona and Bort sat down on the ground and began a spell. Hear me, spirits who command the earth. We are the ones who have received your blessing. Answer our call and change your shape, a double landslide. The hair of Lyona and Bartz began to develop in a veritable way. The guys continued to cast spells. The guys were very serious. The enemy soldiers started panicking and shouting to see if anyone had heard strange noises. One of the soldiers ran away. Kyle looked in front of him and saw that the entire area around him, along with the people, was engulfed in flames. People were screaming everywhere. Suddenly, the moat around the fortress filled with water, and the soldiers were trapped under it. Kyle watched the elements from the bridge. Ryoma watched as the water beat against the walls of the fortress. After a while, Ryoma frowned down at the bottom. In front of them, large clumps of smoke could be seen rising into the sky. Ryoma descended to the ground and began to pass through the wooden gate. Ryoma looked down and saw that the bodies of people were floating in the ravine. Rory said that, as Ryoma had said, the number of those who could not swim turned out to be large. Ryoma said that swimming is not something you can learn on your own, especially in a world where having a decent life is problematic. The guy said that if you are not a boatman or a fisherman, then there is no chance to learn to swim. Rory said that most of the knights are in armor. The allies began to repair the barricades at the fortress, and Ryoma said that they had won a few days. Ryoma asked Rory to tell everyone to rest, except for the reconnaissance squad, and also to bury the dead bodies of the enemies. Rory asked if they should, whether they bury them properly. Ryoma said no, it's just that the dead bodies will infect their warriors. The soldiers from the fortress began to clear the territories around. They collected the bodies of the dead and stored them. A girl with black hair was standing next to him. The mercenary was listening to other soldiers talking about how they really should bury everyone, when one soldier said that their brothers had forbidden them to rob. The mercenary shouted at them to stop discussing it and said that it was their job and greed would not lead anywhere. The girl said that if they won the war, the reward would only increase, so there was no point in stealing and being punished now. The soldiers laughed at the punishment, but the girl said that they had seen everything for themselves. The girl said that Ryoma is an expert in martial arts and can easily defeat an opponent twice his size. The soldiers shouted that it was a joke and asked the girl to forget about what they had just said, after which they left shouting that it was time to work. The mercenary stood silently and remained silent. A blonde girl appeared behind her. The girl looked at the mercenary in surprise. Kyle arrived at the Duke's office. The man said that he was amazed that he dared to show himself to him and thought that he should at least thank him for his courage. The Duke looked at the man and started to get up from the table. Kay said his horse could swim, and when they were overtaken by a wave, he could barely cling to his life. The Duke got up and walked to the side where Kyle was standing. The man pointed a gun at him. Kyle shouted that he wouldn't dare to do something like that and thought that the Duke had decided to punish him right now. The Duke waved his sword and said that he had no intention of killing him now. But that did not mean that he would forgive him and postpone punishment for now, and Kyle would have to pay for the loss of the soldiers he had thoughtlessly sent to attack. Kaido left and the Duke got angry that he was useless. The aide asked the Duke if it was wise to let the military go like that. The Duke went to the window and started talking to the assistant. The assistant recalled the arrival of the forces of General Godram, who recently joined us. The Duke said that one should not give Tom an excuse to swallow them completely. The Duke looked at the map and said that the only thing that separates the forces of the faction of nobles and knights is this river that fell into the hands of the enemy. The man conceived that not only the ability to build a fortress, but also the decision of a water attack is able to deprive him of most of the soldiers, makes him not underestimate the commander of their enemies, but only where this commander came from. The man said that the other side of the earth is a new earth, and decided that he would instruct special people to deal with it. Meanwhile, Ryoma joined his hands together and wished everyone a pleasant appetite. There were other soldiers in the tent besides Ryoma. The girl set the dining table and Ryoma said that otherwise they would have problems, because they need to prepare for a meeting with their main forces, but they need to prepare the same thing while it is possible. The wrestler said that this would be the best opportunity to experience the same thing, and Ryoma ordered that they gather at least 10 people for this. Liana took over the task. Ryoma said he was counting on her and there was only one thing left to do. Sarah ran up to the mercenary and shouted that she would help her with the job. The girl was afraid that she did not feel the slave. The mercenary asked that if she remembered correctly, then Sarah was the one who sold pots. The girl introduced herself as Sarah, a combat slave. Sarah said that the mercenary was the one who subdued the old man yesterday and she admired her, and there aren't many girls of the same age here. That's why she was waiting for the moment to talk to her. The mercenary examined the girl and thought that this was some kind of trap, and said that she did not mind talking and asked, since Sarah was a slave of Remus, whether it was normal for her not to spend time so uselessly or the master was tired of her. Sarah got upset and walked away saying that they were so different. It was because of the difference in conditions or she was too withdrawn into herself. The mercenary shouted that it was a joke. The girl said that she was going to take a break as soon as she finished, and if Sarah could help her, then she could talk to her. Sarah shouted that she agreed and she hooked her. Sakuya wondered what the slave meant by a hook. Sarah said that Sakuya was an unusual name and offered to open a gift bottle with a drink together. Sakuya said she had a job and couldn't drink. Sometime later, the girls opened the bottle and were having fun. Sakuya shouted that it was best to drink when you weren't working, handed the bottle to Sarah and shouted for her to drink too. Sarah thought she wanted to get Sakuya a little drunk to find out something. Sakuya was thinking that she was pretending to be drunk so that Sarah would tell her all the secrets. At the same time, in the main camp, Ryoma asked if everything would be all right. Sakuya pointed to the raft with people and asked who it was. Sarah said that most likely they were from the district, who had arrived on business and were going to return. Sakuya wondered when the merchants had arrived here. There were several people on the ship. One of them was a girl. A handkerchief was tied on her head with which she covered her face. Sarah asked what was wrong with the merchants, when suddenly several crows appeared nearby and the girl shouted what was wrong with these birds for 2-7. Sakuya thought that the long and lingering cries of the crows meant that something would happen at night. Sakuya said that there would be enough breaks and she needed to get back to work because it was getting dark. Late at night in the camp, Sakuya took out a paper in her teeth. Then the girl opened a small bottle and began to pour the liquid from it onto the tip of the blade. Then she took a rag and wiped it with poison from the bottle of her cry. The girl ended up at one of the tents. The moon was shining in the sky, but it was shrouded in clouds. The girl entered the tent and quietly approached the bed, after which she swung a wedge and plunged it into the body under the blanket. The girl struck with a sword. The sword clanked, and the girl threw the blanket aside and was surprised that it was empty. The girl pushed the sheets aside with her hand, and there was no one there. Then she felt a presence behind her. Ryoma approached the killer from behind and struck a sharp blow, which knocked the girl away. Ryoma struck with a finger of one hand. The girl, in turn, reached for her sword again, but Ryoma struck the girl's body with his finger again and she began to fall. Ryoma threw the girl on the floor, and the sisters said that this was the end of the game for her. Sakuya thought about the shadow cloning technique and realized that the girls were twins. Ryoma hit the girl and she lost consciousness. But before these, she saw the faces of two blonde girls who were looking at her. Ryoma said good morning Sakuya and that he was glad to see her on such a beautiful night. The girl was sitting on the floor and was tied up with a rope. Ryoma said that now they can finally talk. The girl frowned and tried to free herself, but her body was tightly bound with a rope. Sakuya asked if the guy was confusing the concept of talking and torture and said that even though she was tied up, she was still a shinobi and was prepared for the worst. Ryoma was surprised and asked if she was really a shinobi. Ryoma looked at the girl carefully and wanted to continue talking. How the sisters looked at each other behind his back and interrupted his conversation. After a moment, Sakuya shouted that the guy had designs on her body, and he was a libertine because he already had 2 slaves. Ryoma said that the main reason why he caught her was his personal interest in her person. The girl said that she understood that he needed her body, and Ryoma screamed that it was not so. Ryoma took the girl's blade and began to examine it. After a while, he said that's why the mercenary uses this weapon. This surprised the girl. Ryoma looked at the girl and said that it could be that the girl was actually from Japan. The girl glared at Ryoma. Then the girl looked down at the bottom and repeated Ryomu's words about Japan. The girl was sitting on the ground tied up, with Ryoma and several other girls standing around her. Everyone was surprised, and Sakuya asked what all this meant and what Ryoma was talking about. Ryoma held a blade in his hands and looked at the girl in surprise. Black hair and eyes, tan skin, but similar to mine. The killer who tried to attack me in my dream calls himself a shinobi named Sakuya, also katana. What does it all mean? Ryoma was examining the Krinok. Then the girl asked which Japan Ryoma was talking about. Ryoma shifted his gaze to the girl. The guy said that Japan is a country and wasn't she born there? The girl said that she had never heard of this name on the Western continent and where this country is located. Ryoma asked what about the Eastern continent and said that he had heard from a merchant that katana existed in the culture of the Eastern continent. Sakuya said it was fortunate that, but had never set foot outside the Western continent. Ryoma asked where the girl got the Japanese blade from. Sakuya said that this blade has been the weapon of her clan for many generations since a long time. Ryoma asked what kind of clan, as a stranger came into the tent. An old man appeared in the tent and said that he would explain to him their vagabond clan and that was their fate. Sakuya shouted what Grandpa was doing, and the old man said he was a safety net. The old man said that according to the plan, he would eliminate the target if it failed. The guys abruptly turned to the bed where an unknown man was sitting. His appearance was too sudden. The girl looked at the man in surprise as she recognized her grandfather in him. A man came up to her and told her that she had failed the task. Girls, those who were standing next to Ryoma, were outraged. He raised his hand up and asked them to calm down. The old man said that Ryoma was not surprised by his appearance, and either he was a fool who did not understand the situation or a big man who would not pay attention to it. The man sat down on the bed. Ryoma smiled and said that it surprised him and he did not remember inviting the old man here. Ryoma thought what kind of old man he was. He completely dispelled the excitement of his subordinates, continuing to be on his wave. The old man asked why Ryoma hadn't killed the girl and what he was planning, leaving the assassin aiming for his life alive, and why he wasn't trying to detain him. Ryoma said that if the old man had heard the conversation from the very beginning, then he was sure he had ideas about it. The old man said he wanted to make sure. Ryoma said that he came from Earth and from the country where their clan came from. The old man understood and said that Ryoma was Hiramoto's man. Ryoma said that the country is now called Japan. The old man said that he had heard that the people with Hiramoto had stopped fighting and were acting like cowards after seeing an opponent like Ryoma. The old man approached the girl and shouted how long she was going to lie on the floor and ordered the girl to take off her clothes. The girl was surprised by her grandfather's words. She tried to contradict him, but in the next instant a blade flew towards her. The Duke was taking a bath at his estate and asked the servant if he had finished reorganizing their army. The servant said that he had encountered problems that were not originally planned. The Duke got angry and shouted what he was doing then. It had been 3 days since he gave the order to do it. Even if they suffered losses, they should still have 60,000 soldiers left. The Duke said that he did not care that the nobility would put pressure on them and ordered them to tell everyone to prepare and enter Heraklion tomorrow. The servant said that they were unlucky to call the nearest farmers. The servant got up from the water and started shouting about the huge number of warriors. The servant was scared and bowed down in front of the enraged Duke. The Duke ordered the servant to simply suppress these rumors. The Duke wondered if bad things were happening to him one after another, and it was possible that the devil himself or something similar was fighting on Rima's side. The old man swung his sword and cut the girl's clothes. Ryoma was surprised by the technique. The clothes from the girl's body began to fall to the ground. The guy thought that it was more primitive than modern, and it was impressive that the old man cut only clothes. The old man examined the girl and found a wound on her body, after which he said that she had been wounded in vital places. The marks were quite small and they were not from ordinary blows. The old man asked if Ryoma had used a spear shaft, but the guy said it was an ordinary fist. The old man said that it's effective to aim at vital points, and that's how you say you can kill someone of Sakui's level whenever you want. The old man said that Ryoma has impressive skills and despite the girl's appearance, she is the one who will lead the clan in the future. Ryoma asked if he could ask a few questions. Ryoma asked if their clan was created by a man who was called here in the past. The old man agreed and said that their ancestor had arrived here 500 years ago. But in the case of our ancestor, he was drafted along with the whole village. Ryoma is shocked by the old man's words. The man said that such appeals are not practiced now and heard that several people can be called per year. Ryoma wondered if there were other Japanese who were trying their best to survive in another world. The guy said if there are several people a year, then the chances are low and he has terrible luck. The guy asked why the clan decided to work as an assassin, because the clan is full of assassins. The old man said that every member of their clan is a rappa. Ryoma realized that they were ninjas and asked why their clan was wandering if ninjas were supposed to be at court. The old man frowned and asked why he was interested in this. Ryoma looked in surprise at the side where the older man was standing. Ryoma abruptly bowed in front of the man and began to apologize for his behavior. The surrounding people looked at Remus in surprise. The old man introduced himself to Igasaki Jino and said that he liked Ryoma and offered to team up from now on. Ryoma asked what it was about when the old man said that he understood if the guy left his granddaughter alive. Then he wanted to make her a personal rap and stated that if so, then he would join him with his granddaughter. The old man told Sakuya not to argue because Rap, who failed the task, was supposed to die, but Ryoma made efforts so that the girl would not die. And for this, you need to spend the rest of your life serving your master. Sakuya and the old man ran off into the forest. The girl said that you can't quit the job you were given, that's how she was taught. The old man agreed, and Sakuya asked if it suited him. The old man said that there was a possibility that the vagrant clan would disappear soon. The old man and the girl continued to move quickly through the night forest and discussed their next plan of action. A week later, Rory came to Ryoma, who was examining the katana, and asked if the people from the vagrant clan could be trusted. The guy admired the katana and showed it to Rory. The girl said that they were assassins who came to take his life, and you never know when they will decide to betray them. Ryoma said that he was right, but he first planned to give them freedom, although this changed the plan, but this is not a big problem. Rory said that Ryoma says that because he is pleased with katana. The guy said that it was possible since he was given this katana as proof of friendship, but they can also be trusted more than knights. Ryoma remembered the cries of devotion from the knights when Rory asked why it was different to the fan, and the guy said it was just like that. The girl did not understand such explanations. 490. Rory shouted that it was also because Remus had been given a cross-shaped spear along with a katana. The guy admitted that this also plays a role. Rory was scared and said that Ryoma really liked the assassin girl, and the guy shouted that he swore that it wasn't that, but he needed people who understood espionage. Rory said she understood his position and they would follow him, but told the guy not to let his guard down. Ryoma remembered his girlfriend and laughed. Then he thought that the situation with Rory was similar to this memory. Liana came into the room and shouted that the Knights of the Rhodesia had finally arrived. The guys were very wary after her words. Boats with soldiers arrived at the walls of the fortress. Mrs. Alina apologized for keeping them waiting and asked if the time had passed to fulfill their promise. Ramak came out of the tent to Alina outside. Alina was smiling broadly and looking at the guy. There were a lot of soldiers around them. They were serious. Duke Gerhardt is surprised. He is not sure that he heard Mr. Kodram's words correctly. The Duke, stunned, asked if he had heard everything correctly. He muttered uncertainly that he had a strange feeling that Mr. Kodram wanted him to hand over all the powers to him. Kodram didn't say anything in response and just grinned impudently. Kodram rests his chin on his hands. He says that if a man prefers the short version, then he understood everything correctly, because it has already been shown that people will lose simple battles if they leave everything in Gerhardt's hands. From those words, Kyle tightens his lips and frowns, closing his eyes, because he was thinking about Hodram's words. The man was furious at his words. Gerhardt slapped the table and jumped up from behind it. He called the general an obscene word and asked him who he thought he was, because he was just a pathetic deserter general. The Duke thinks that Hodram is a rat, even though it was the Duke who created this council, because he heard that Hadrama had good ideas. Kodram dared to recall the defeat in the last skirmish at the very beginning of the council. After some time, the man, who was enraged by Hodram's words, still calmed down his ardor and sat down. Kodram looks at the interlocutor with predatory eyes. He thinks that when people try to attack him, they should attack first. It was a principle for his whole life. He mentally tells the Duke to be a good boy and let himself be warmed up. The man squints at Hodram. He wonders what this cunning, traitorous man is up to. The Duke is even more outraged by this situation, because this upstart has only 2,000 men under his command, while even after the reorganization, the Duke will have 20,000. Although for the most part these are mobilized peasants, but do not forget that the man also has cavalry, and if he wants to, he can force Hodram out. Then someone's hand rises, and the person expresses his confident agreement with the general's opinion. Both men looked at Kyle in disbelief. However, he asked if he had not made himself quite clear and asked for an opportunity to rephrase his words. As it turned out, he really believes that they should transfer authority to General Hodram, Then the men on the council began to whisper to each other and think about solutions. Kyle gets up from his seat, addressing the Duke. Kyle says that he, to whom the Duke entrusted the army, let him down. So the only similar solution, in his opinion, to defeat the enemy who was able to defeat him is to allow a stronger leader to lead an army of soldiers. Here Duke Gerhardt looks at Kyle with a dumbfounded look. He doesn't understand what the man is talking about. Here Gerhardt turns to Hadram and asks if he has lured Kyle to his side. The general looks at the Duke in disbelief. The Duke does not believe that Hadram could have lured anyone to his side. However, Kyle asks the Duke if it's really that surprising that he's on the general's side. Kyle admitted that he suffered a crushing defeat in the last fight. He is ready to take full responsibility. However, this does not mean that he will silently stand aside when he is so humiliated as a knight. The Duke does not believe what he has heard. He pays attention to the word humiliated, which Kyle uttered in his direction. Kyle frowns and wonders why the Duke still hasn't figured it out. Frowning, Kyle asks that the Duke still doesn't understand anything. He believes that the Duke is not suitable as a leader for their army. Kyle throws up his hands and says that the Duke is not a knight at all. He doesn't have a single hint of interest in military science. All the Duke does, in Kyle's opinion, is sit in a chair and dishonor the knights with his sword. Kyle said the Duke does this by playing with people's lives. Every day these people risk their lives for him, and in the end it didn't bring any result. Kyle thinks that Gerhardt does not understand that his actions at such a moment are the greatest dishonor towards them. Kyle approaches the general, expressing communion with his side. Gerhardt is stunned to ask what kind of dishonor he is talking about. He shouts to them that he is the one who provides them with work. All the horses, people, and everything they have now, the Duke has allowed them to have it. Kyle waves his hand and calmly says that the Duke is absolutely right. It is because of this that he is trying to find the best way to defeat them. Gerhardt listens to him with his arms crossed over his chest. Then one of the men, who was tired of their noisy arguments, asked him to stop wasting his time on this. He invites everyone to express their opinion directly. Kyle agrees and argues that if he has to serve someone like the Duke, who does not understand the basics of warfare, then he would prefer to end his life. He thinks it's a pretty simple outcome. The Duke felt betrayed. The general began to burst into loud laughter right across the room during the council. He recognizes it as a great honor to know that Kyle appreciates him so much. The men began to look at each other after such statements. One of the men also recognized the way Kyle suggested to keep the victory. The Duke did not expect that the man also supported the opponent's side. The general asks the Duke not to worry because they both want the same thing. If the Duke allows the general to command the army, then he swears that he will get the maximum out of the army. He suggests to the Duke that he and the army will be able to defeat the Lupis faction. Immediately, there were cheers from all sides in the direction of Hadram. All the men thought his speech was pretty well spoken and sounded promising. Everyone called on Hadram to bring victory back to their camp. At this time, the Duke was overwhelmed by literally every phrase that came out of the mouths of the men in the council. After a while, evening came. Clouds were gathering in the sky and the sun was no longer visible. The Duke is sitting in his office. He leaned his head on his hands. The pressure exerted on him during the council completely crushed him. The man wonders why everything turned out this way and where he made a mistake. He wonders why there was no one on his side in the end. The Gerhardt family is a proud and noble couple. The Duke does not understand why he is being treated this way. Moreover, other noble people behaved very absurdly about these people. This can be considered a coup d'état. Here a man enters the office and addresses Gerhardt, calling him his lordship. He asks with a smile to raise his head. The Duke is surprised by his appearance. He immediately gets up from his desk. He walks up to him and grabs his hands. Duke Gerhardt begs him for help because he has no one else left except this man. Out of desperation, his hands are clutching the sleeves of that man's clothes very tightly. The country instructed the man to prolong the civil war for at least 6 months, but this is definitely not good. The man sincerely assures, in order to reassure him, the Duke that he has a plan to stop all this. The Duke frantically asks the man if this is really true, and the man will be able to somehow influence the situation, which is rapidly heating up and is definitely not for his benefit. The newcomer comforts the Duke. He understands that they are, of course, limited in their actions because of Hadram, who is trying to harm them, but there is something that can help them. The man wants to continue, but then the Duke cuts him off in mid-sentence and screams at him to stop pouring salt on his wound. Then the man patiently asks to listen to the Duke until the end of his speech. The man explains that in any case, the Duke should not underestimate the commander of the enemies. Not only because of defeating Kyle with his water attack, but also because of his impeccable control of spreading rumors after the victory. Duke Gerhardt seems to understand something. He asks if the man means something about the demon Heraclean, saying that he spread rumors after the victory. The man agrees. He explains that when such speculations have reached a critical mass and penetrated into the hearts of people, it will not be easy to eradicate fear from them. This only proves that their enemy is very smart. The man thinks it's just a trap set for them. Then the Duke realizes this and wonders what to do in this case. He asks the man if he offers to warn Harem about this. The man denies it because it won't do them any good. Instead, he suggests using such a rumor. At this time, Mr. Ryoma is addressed by Rora, who has just approached him with a serious expression on her face. She reports that there are no signs of further enemy attacks on this fortress. She wonders if it is possible that they want to settle the score by opposing them on the plain. Ryoma is thinking about the decisive battle on the plain. By organizing a decisive battle in the wheat fields, they will eventually deplete the kingdom's resources. It will be difficult to calculate tax collections next year. But in the end, the enemies allowed citizens to be robbed, so they can decide to do this. Thanks to the rumors, the enemy troops should be heavily demoralized now, especially considering that most of them are mobilized peasants, and now the princess of the royal knights has joined them. Then they will have the advantage. The guy understands that the decisive factor is military power in the open field. This is a good situation for them. He understands that in this case they can win. The girls look at him puzzled, and after a while one of them, Sarah, was delighted and tells Rama that it's quite cool. The guy agrees with her. However, Ryoma cannot understand what is bothering him because everything is going too well. He talks about it while stroking his chin thoughtfully. Then a voice is heard from the other side, calling the guy. As it turned out, Miss Alina was standing behind the fence, who came to visit them. She turns to the guy in order for him to pay attention to her. After a while, she asks Chris to support her sword. She hesitantly picks up a weapon and agrees to the woman's request. Literally a second later, the woman touches one of the fence bars, finding support in this. She deftly jumps over the fence, approaching the guy. Chris was immediately worried about Mrs. Alina. She is stunned to watch a woman who bravely jumps off such a wall and calls out to her in fright. Alina lands confidently in front of the guy. She says that she is a knight of darkness and the one who will send this world into the abyss and who will return to it in the end himself. She is Alina Steiner. She decided to make a spectacular appearance on the guy's territory so that the girls were just delighted with such an appearance. However, Ryoma did not appreciate it. In the royal capital, the woman was constantly sullen. It seems that the woman is starting to scare him. Alina smiled warmly. The air on the front line is simply amazing, it energizes her. Alina runs her hand over the fortress. She notes that they have a pretty impressive one. The woman is amazed that they were able to build something like this in such a short time. Ryoma notices that the woman ignored his question about her mood. The guy says that it's not that amazing. However, Alina reproached him that the guy never seemed to have heard that excessive modesty is a sign of arrogance. Her Highness would be amazed when she comes. When the topic came up, Ryoma immediately darkened his face and scratched his head. He told Alina about what really happened back then. The woman asked in surprise if Mikkel was really on the battlefield then. Ryoma agreed. He explains that Mikkel led the attack on the enemy, although his task was only to scout the area. And now Mikkel is missing. Alina says that whatever the reason for Mikkel's act, he clearly violated the military regulations, even though the man intended to command Ryoma in this mission. The guy exhales and says that he knew about it. The woman says that this is a very bad outcome, and the guy suggests that it may be because of this that the princess may doubt his loyalty. However, the woman refutes these guesses and says that the princess is not so subject to doubt. Mikkel has been a loyal knight of Her Highness since childhood. Alina thinks she's known him longer than all of them put together. Alina wanted to continue the story but stopped and asked the guy to forget about these words. She asked the guy to understand the situation because she herself intends to tell Princess Lupis about it. The guy agreed in surprise and left the matter to Alina. Meanwhile, on a dark night, several attentive guards guard the entrance to the chambers with weapons in their hands, always ready. In this luxurious room, the princess is sitting in the middle, and Miss Alina is kneeling humbly in front of her, her head bowed low. The woman tells the princess about what happened then. Princess Lupis is clearly not happy about this news. She sat meekly, as befitted a princess. She understood the whole report. The maid saw her mistress's agitation. Ms. Lupis thanked Alina for the report. After a few moments, she asked Meltina to let her be alone with herself today, apologizing in advance to her. The maid wanted to object, but then she saw the princess's eyes full of pain and pleading. Mrs. Lupis sincerely asked the maid to obey her. Meltina went outside. Mrs. Lupis was left alone in her chambers. The girl was sitting on the bed, her head bowed low in grief. Memories immediately flashed through her mind from her childhood. when Mikkel was always by her side and helped her in absolutely everything. Remembering how, as a little girl, she puts a wreath of flowers on his head, she tearfully asks Mr. Mikkel to survive in this whole story. The princess is distracted from her memories and thoughts by a voice from the side. This voice suggests that the princess is in deep sadness. From these words, the girl shudders, breaking out of her thoughts. Mrs. Lupis gets scared and turns towards the voice. She asks who is next to her. It turned out that there was a man standing in a dark corner whose identity could not be seen or recognized because of the large robe. The princess began to guess that it might be an assassin and immediately began to call the guards. However, the unnamed man told her with a smile that it was absolutely useless to call the guards to his chambers. After all, thanks to the technique of the newcomer, the rest of the fortress is now floating in dreams and cannot help her. The man in the robe says that depending on the decision of the princess and her response, he may not be able to guarantee the continued preservation of Mr. Mikkel's life. Then the princess realizes that Mikkel may still be alive. She asks what the newcomer means and what he wants from her. He asks the princess not to worry too much. After all, he only wants to have a little chat with her. He reaches out and takes off his hood with a smile. He offers the princess only to exchange the war for the most valuable life of Mr. Mikkel. A man based on such a situation may not be able to guarantee Mikkel's life further. He says that everything depends on the princess's response. Princess Lupis looks at the smiling man who is Duke Gerhardt's advisor and realizes that Mikkel is alive. She raises her eyebrows and asks if this man is threatening her. Then she tensely asks who he is anyway. The girl is interested in how the man got into the room without raising the alarm. This man smiles slyly and chuckles knowingly. He apologizes for not introducing himself earlier. He said his name was Pseudo. The man stopped and said more confidently that his name was Pseudo Akidake. He suggests that the princess consider him a humble contact of one person. While they were talking, all the guards were sleeping peacefully at the entrance to the rest. Pseudo Akidake clarifies with the princess that Mikoshiba is the commander of this army. He clarifies with the princess that this guy is really smart. After all, it was because of him that the old man was forced to swim for quite a long time. Pseudo explains that he also had to strain his back a lot, which is quite difficult for an old man like him. He thinks his joke is funny and shows a movement with his hand, imitating the swimming of a fish in the water. Princess Lupis understands that this man swam across a large river on his own in such a state. Besides, there was supposed to be a patrol on the river. She talks about what Pseudo is up to. The princess resolutely looks at the man. She asks what his goal is since he has come so far. She asks him to stop fooling around and get to the point. The princess herself tries to quietly pull out her weapon from under the pillow. The man smiles with his eyes and says that he works for the Duke, as the princess could already guess. Pseudo explains that everything is a little different in reality. He asks him to let him sit on a chair because his legs are already shaking because he is already aged, but the princess did not take her intense gaze off Pseudo, who was trying to defuse the situation with jokes. Pseudo sat down on a chair right in front of the princess's bed, and now he is ready to get down to business. He says that Duke Gerhardt is thinking of swearing allegiance to her. Princess Lupis was not ready to hear these words. She clarifies the man's question by repeating his words. She suggests that Pseudo probably didn't hear and the Duke rather wanted them to give up just like that. The man waved his hands. The princess wonders if the newcomer even knows the situation. She doesn't understand why she has to accept the Duke. She says Pseudo has forgotten that the Duke staged a riot because of the child he brought because of the king's last wish. Remembering all this, the princess becomes furious. After all, now the Duke wants to swear an oath to her and expects her to forget about everything. She asks the man to be honest with her and says that the Duke deserves the death penalty. However, the man humbles the princess with only one reproach about the importance of Mikkel's life for her. The girl immediately fell silent. The man asks to allow one question. Pseudo asks how many people the princess can trust no matter what. The princess is furious again, and she rudely orders you not to even dare to say such a thing to her. A round iron disc is flying towards the man here, which could hit a man in 1 second. The disc cuts into the leg of the chair. The princess was surprised because she did not expect that an attack would be made in her chambers. The man just smiled and tried to pull the metal ring out of the chair leg. He admits that the attack was quite dangerous. He considers it cruel that even though he is a trespasser in this house, to attack him without any warning. While saying this, Pseudo carefully examines this round throwing weapon, which he holds in his hands. As it turned out, it was a chakra, a kind of throwing weapon. He examines the chakra. He understands that this thing is quite rare. He believes that he knows the only person who is capable of using this weapon. Before naming this person, Pseudo smiles slyly. He turns to the man who attacked him and asks if he is Mikoshiba Ryoma. As soon as the man utters this name, another chakra flies next to him. crashing into the chair he was sitting on again. Then Pseudo realizes that he is being ignored. The man throws up his hands and asks the attacker to show himself in any case. Princess Lupi stared at the man in surprise. Pseudo talks about being made to look like a fool talking to himself. Immediately behind the princess, someone began to cut the fabric of the chambers. Then someone grabbed the princess by the hand and pulled her back through the hole, which was made with a weapon. As it turned out, Meltina had released her majesty from her chambers. Pseudo barely noticed it. The girl put Princess Lupi's on the ground. She apologizes to her and says that she will pay for this miscalculation a little later. Here Meltina tells Rama that her majesty is safe. The guy, hearing the girl's message, called for all the soldiers who were holding fire sticks to get ready. On Ryoma's orders, all the soldiers began throwing lighted sticks towards the chambers, and immediately they burst into a bright and large flame, illuminating all the darkness around. Princess Lupi's notices that the chambers are starting to burn. She frantically asks to wait. She tells Meltina that a person cannot be deprived of life and asks her to get water and put out the fire. The girl does not understand what Her Majesty is talking about. The princess can only frantically ask to fulfill her request, because she wants to ask something from the man who so unexpectedly burst into her chambers. Meanwhile, the princess's chambers were burning with a bright flame. Meltina looks towards the fire and says that it seems too late to save the killer. Then a dark silhouette appears in the flames. There is one opinion from the outside that this is a rather cruel technique. The man comes out of the fire and asks the soldier to give him some respite because they burned his best clothes. He brushes the ashes off his sleeves. Here Ryoma grabs a katana and wonders if the man is even human. Here Pseudo joyfully spread his hands. He is glad that the guy finally decided to talk. Then the man noticed how the guy pulled out his katana with a click. He grins and thinks the guy is a sociopath because he wants to take a silent approach again. Ryoma is madly looking at the man. He swings with all his might and grazes the man's body with his sword. Suddenly, Ryoma's eyes widen in shock. As it turned out, Pseudo managed to deflect the blow with his sword. However, Mikoshiba Ryoma's incessant attacks prevented even unnecessary movement, leaving only the opportunity to defend against aggressive attacks. The man, considering the quality of his own and the opponent's weapons, suggests that Rime postpone their battle for the future. The guy makes another lunge and delivers another attack. Pseudo is not happy at all that Ryoma is completely ignoring his words. Pseudo realizes that he can't afford to fight the guy here. Immediately, the guy stands up in a stance, summoning his strength. He raises the sword high up. Pseudo notices that Ryoma is standing in a fire stance. He asks him if it's not too good for such an occasion because he can't end his life here. Here the princess screams desperately and asks Ryoma to wait a little and not kill Pseudo yet, because she needs him. In response, the guy just says that he has no reason to stop. The princess sincerely asks to lower the sword, literally begging the guy for it. She wants to explain everything to him. The guy hesitates a bit and lowers the sword to the side. The princess approaches him and the man is very happy about this outcome. Pseudo thinks Ryoma is a poor man. After some time, when everyone has calmed down more or less, Pseudo thinks that Ryoma is a problematic person. Pseudo says that Duke Gerhardt has decided to swear allegiance to the princess, and to prove his sincerity, the Duke plans to return Mikkel, who is now imprisoned in a shelter in Harklian. But it all depends on how Pseudo leaves this place. Elena, Rima and Melton met all his words with a reproachful look, because they did not expect such insolence on his part at all. Here the princess turns to her supporters with a desire to hear their opinion on this matter. Ryoma asks a question based on his opinion. He believes that the princess has already decided everything for herself. He thinks she's really kind. However, they were only planning actions according to the will of the king, and they had no desire to start an uprising. Everything was planned by Harem and only by him. The guy understands the full scope of the situation. To blame Harem for everything in order to save ourselves. And people want him and the princess to accept all these apologies in exchange for the life of one night. Ryoma considered this a real absurdity. The guy realizes that even Meltina has no words. Although she can't say a word, probably because she is close to the princess. The guy understands that he has no options and he must be the one who can answer. He raises his hand to express his opinion. Then someone's foot stops him. Elena immediately steps on the guy's foot to make him sit down. She whispers to the guy that he can't say anything. The woman explains this to the guy by saying that the guy still has a lot ahead of him, and there is no need to make Her Majesty dislike the guy now. Ryoma looks at the woman in amazement, and Elena immediately contradicted Her Majesty. The princess met her with a reproachful look. The woman explains that taking the oath of court will also mean that the princess allows the second princess to go on stage. And this will only give an excuse to repeat the rebellion in the country. Alina understands how close she was to Mikkel as a child. However, Mikkel is also an army general. He should have understood the fate of the losing side's general. Alina is not 100% sure that he would like the chaotic future kingdom of the Rhodesia. Alina is looking for approval from Pseudo. The man confirms the woman with a question. Alina asks me to tell Mikkel to end his life right away. Meltina looked at the woman in shock, and the man in Ryoma subdued her with a serious look. Pseudo understands what the White Goddess of War of the Road series is now, General Alina Steiner. That's what you'd expect from her. Suddenly, the princess abruptly jumped up from her seat and slammed her palm on the table. Ryoma started and looked at her in surprise. The girl exclaimed that she had another solution. The princess asked loudly and confidently what would happen if Mikkel became king. She did it because of Alina's words. And then Rama and Alina looked at the princess dumbfounded. Her Majesty says that in this case, saving the king is the most important priority. Meltina asks Her Highness to wait a bit. She says that if this is just a hypothetical proposal, then it's a little too much. The princess immediately thought about it. She realizes that she made a big mistake. She put her hands to her face and asked everyone present to forget everything she had just said. After a moment, the princess cleared her throat and calmed down. She thanked Alina for her advice. She believes that her opinion is correct from the knight's point of view. However, the princess can't do anything. Mikkel is one of the knights whom she believes implicitly. Losing such an ally would definitely be a big problem for the future of the Road series. Of course, they can interrogate him about violations in the future, but since Mikkel can be saved, then they must do it. The princess wonders if she is too naive if she believes that they will not have to fight against Duke Gerhardt, and this may mean fewer losses on both sides. Then Ramu stretches out his hand. He gets up from his seat and asks the princess to let him speak. Without waiting for an answer, he says that he also thinks that taking Gerhardt's oath, which Pseudo suggests, is a good idea. The girl was glad that there was still hope for Mikkel's salvation, and sincerely thanked Ryoma Mikoshiba. However, Ryoma thinks that Mikkel will have to leave the title and pay compensation as conditions for the implementation of this scenario, and a man will be banned from getting a post at the royal court for several years. The guy turns to Pseudo and asks his opinion that this is a pretty low price compared to life. The man smiles when everything was decided, and he still got his way. Pseudo says they have an agreement. Now there are only 2,500 knights left under the command of Hadram. Lionel believes that if they continue to fight him, they will lose the granary. But otherwise, the power in the kingdom will be divided, which in the end will give other countries a chance to invade. Ryoma agrees with the girl's words, and Sir Bolt suggests that they are between a rock and an anvil. Ryoma says that in any case, they will achieve their goal in this way. The guys look at the guy with approval. It was finally their time to attack Heraklion. Ryoma realizes that this is their last battle. The time has come. The cavalry gathered and they were all waiting for the order to begin their action. Meltina expressed her willingness to start the battle. The princess waved her hand in the direction of the endless field and called on the army to start the battle. The residents seem to understand that their affairs are bad because the war begins. Some people think that the devil has come to attack them, and that very devil has finished with those in the river and is now coming here. According to the residents, the demon probably doesn't care if they are from noble families, just peasants or women with a child. Here the residents are already in complete panic and shouting that the devil of Heraklion is coming. At this time, the princess directs all the troops forward. She calls on the soldiers to bring her Hadram's head. Ryoma thinks that the army looks quite inspired. Sarah asks him if they would do well if they did not join the army. Ryoma agrees because they have numerical advantages. There is no reason to support an attack on Heraklion. He explained that on top of everything else, Pseudo contributed to the exodus of the feudal lords from the alliance because of the news of Gerhardt joining us. Ryoma says that the only ones left are Hadram's direct subordinates, and those who simply did not have time to leave the city. The girl looks at the guy with concern and thinks about who this Pseudo really is. The guy intends to find out soon. The guy understands that in any case, the princess will cope with Heraklion on her own. Here Ryoma calls Gina. The man suddenly appeared from behind the girls, thereby scaring them badly. Jinyu tells the guy that his prediction was correct. He is full of seriousness, and the girl understands that this old man is very good at maneuvers. Jinyu explains that, according to the merchant, he came from Kadram's residence, and apparently the general bought a lot of clothes and title documents from him. Moreover, Hadram used gold coins. They realized that the general was trying to wrap the coins as quickly as possible. And based on this, it seems that he is trying to increase his natural capital, knowing that he will lose the war. Lionel notices that Hadram looks like he bought provisions. For example, pickled cucumbers and other long-lasting products. Ryoma is sure that this is not the standard diet of his soldiers, and he clarifies this with the guy. His words confirm it. Ryoma is unhappy because he realized how bad a person Harem is, just as Alina described. Sarah leans over and asks what Ryoma means. The guy explains that in a normal situation, there is a special detachment that is responsible for observing the standards of provisions for soldiers. Ryoma is talking about the supply squad now. In other words, there is no reason for the commander to buy supplies on his own. However, as the girl herself heard, the fact that Kadram personally exchanged some of the money from the merchant for the long-lasting food of his residence means that he is trying to escape the country on his own. The guy came to this conclusion. Then Alina comes out from the side. She says that moreover, most likely Kadram will make an escape attempt during their offensive on Heraklion. The girls are clearly unhappy with Hadram's personality. The guy is surprised because he did not expect to see where Alina is. He thought that a woman should accompany Princess Lupis on a camping trip. Alina says she didn't go with them from the very beginning. She asks Ramat to think about it himself, because if Alina had left after the start of the march, the morale of the soldiers would have definitely fallen. Alina would blame herself for setting up Princess Lupis like that. Ryoma is still asking questions. Alina starts coughing and says that something is wrong with her, and Ryoma realizes that the woman lied and is just pretending. And then Alina says that this is such a privilege for an old lady. Alina says that everything is in perfect order. After all, even Meltina comforted her in tears. She asks the guy to understand her. It is not surprising that the male part of the army has such a fighting spirit. In any case, Ramat is surprised that Alina has already figured out the situation inside Heraklion. The woman asks not to underestimate the veteran. She wanted to say it, but it was all thanks to her magnificent subordinates, and Chris smiled softly from behind her. Sir Boltz turns to Alina and asks if she has any idea which way Hadram will run. A man can only name 4 directions: southeast, south, southwest, and west. The girls notice that Hadram has nowhere to go inside the kingdom. Besides, having accumulated a substantial sum, he will surely go abroad to rehabilitate the army. Alina looks at the map carefully. She understands that in this case Kadram will go to the west. Ryoma asks the woman if she thinks Kadram will actually go there. Alina replies that he will do this because Hadram's wife was a noblewoman from the neighboring side, the kingdom of Zarad. The cavalry is running along the road at great speed. Kadram turns to Kyle and asks him if he is sure that there are no pursuers behind them. Kyle agrees. He doesn't see anyone at the moment. Hadram thinks that his decision to follow Kyle's advice and retreat at this very moment was the right one. That's why apparently no one realized that Kadram was already on the run. Kyle thanks the man for his kind words. Kadram asks not to think that he will swallow all this so easily. He promises to repay everyone in full, but that they treated him like a fool. He mentally turns to Princess Lupis, Gerhardt, who are now his main opponents. He also addresses Alina. The general thinks that he took Alina out of pity and let her live, since she said she would quietly step aside. But the man could not have imagined that she would turn her weapon against him. Kyle looks at him and says that even if they attack Heraklion now, they will not meet what they expect. They will be greeted by deserted streets. The man does not think that at least one fight will take place. It's all thanks to the stupid peasants who made a fuss about the Heraklionic devil. Kadram says that this idea is simply brilliant. He believes that if only the residents were as thrifty as he was, they would not panic so much. The knight next to him lowers his face, hiding it in the shadow of his helmet, and says nothing. The cavalry is heading on its way. One of the men asks what is the condition of General Kadram's family and if there are any problems. The soldier replies that they are doing everything possible to make them feel comfortable in the wagon. Kadram asks to take care of them because they are his last trump cards. That's how he talks about his wife and daughter. He considers his daughter especially useful, because she will bring great benefits when she marries the prince of the kingdom of Zarad. The general thinks that when he seizes power as the prince's father, luck will be with them and all his supporters will become royal guards. He promises the soldiers a proper reward, and the cavalry unanimously agrees with him. It was a dark night. An army was deployed for Kadram and his family. Kyle approaches the room. He tells Hadram that they will continue their journey at first light, so the man needs to rest now. Hadram lifts the cloth. He offers Kyle a sip to cheer up the spirit. Kyle closes his eyes and apologizes because he refuses because he has to be sober. The man says that he is sorry. He says that a lightly salted cucumber goes well with river fish. Ironically, it tastes even better now, considering that Hadram will have such a diet for some time. Kyle asks you to forgive him in this case because he has to prepare for tomorrow. However, before Kyle could finish speaking, he heard something. Hadram looked into the distance and asked Kyle what could be wrong. The man turned around on the general's orders and said that there was nothing, because he thought he heard some sounds. A moment later, one soldier shouted that they were being attacked, the enemy was attacking, and fire arrows landed on the ground near them. Kyle calls Harem, the man answers him and tells him that they need to get out of here urgently. Harem takes his wife and daughter back to the wagon. Kyle says that the road on the mountain to the kingdom of Zarud should still be safe. Kyle will try to delay the enemies. He asks Harem to use this time usefully and hurry up. Kyle instructs his subordinates to deal with the opponents. Harem retreats into the depths of the forest. He entrusts the rest to Kyle. He urges the man to meet in the capital of Zarud. After saying goodbye, Kyle turns to his soldiers and orders them all to calm down. He orders those who hold the shield to line up and forget about the fire. Here Leonel jumps down from the tree. She considers it a fine that she discovered the general. She thinks the man's head will be hers. She jumps from a branch directly at the general, pointing the blade of her sword at him. Kyle manages to hide behind his shield. He swings it and the girl jumps back a few steps. Kyle considers her a bandit, but she is more agile than an ordinary bandit. Suddenly Kyle hears a spell from the side. The spell summons the spirits that direct the thunder to hear the master. It calls on them to take blood as payment and show their true power. Spells summon spirits to heed and crush his enemies. Huge lightning shots appear in Kyle's place. The girl wonders if they hit the man. As it turned out, he covered himself with his shield again. Kyle says that against his anti-magic enchanted armor, Sir Bolt's pathetic magic is simply nothing. The man says that it was a combination of enchanting and enhancing magic. And the girl grins and realizes that the general will not give up without a fight. Kyle frowns and says that's not what he's talking about. Then Bolts and Leona wondered. Kyle says that these two are simply unworthy to be his opponents, and pathetic bandits like them won't even be able to scratch it. Kyle promises to pretend like nothing happened if they leave right now. Then a voice is heard from the side, which says that they can't just turn around and go home. As it turned out, it was Ryoma. He says that now it's Kyle Irunia's turn to say goodbye to life. Kyle realized that the commander of the fortress had arrived, and Leona and Bolts were glad to see the young master. Kyle found out that the Herculean devil was behind everything, who organized this sudden attack on their camp. Ryoma hastened to dispel Kyle's doubts and all these rumors. He gave his full name to the man and expressed his joy at meeting him. Ryoma turns to Leonel and asks if she can continue the battle. The girl agrees, despite the fact that she twisted her ankle a little. In this case, Ryoma asks her to go to Laura and kill the leftovers. He turns around and with a grim expression on his face, gives his men the order not to spare anyone. Leona expresses her consent and departs. Bolts tells Ryoma and asks him to be more vigilant because Kyle uses both reinforcement magic and durability magic. Here one of the guys shouts at Mr. Kyle and asks him to run away from here. He himself pointed his blade towards Ryoma and wanted to make a lunge, but immediately Jinyu appeared behind the guy. The man took the guy's life in one deft movement. Unfortunately, he cannot allow his lordship to cross the road. Jinyu asks to provide it to them. The man asks Ramu to put an end to this civil war. The guy looks at Gina with enthusiasm and agrees with him. Although, if you think about it, maybe this battle is a big gamble for Kyle himself. Kyle thinks the guy is a fool, because the magic of strengthening the tower shield is comparable only to that of heaven. And Kyle's shallow shield and not a powerful sword will never be able to pierce his armor. Kyle is full of hatred for the guy. He makes another attack and urges him to get away with his paper weapon. Ryoma realizes that Kyle is quite nimble. And despite its heavy equipment, apparently all this strengthening magic is not a joke. However, this is not all. Kyle's swordsmanship is also nice. It would be a perfect example of the old school of swordsmen. The guy understands that the man has the advantage in a one-on-one fight, but he knows that there is no absolute in this world, as Ryoma thought under this medal. Ryoma remembers the teacher's instruction. Grandfather said that Ryoma should not just swing a sword, but constantly think about the blade as an extension of his hands. The guy has to forget everything and focus on tearing something in front of him. Ryoma is full of determination. Kyle looks like he's going to make an attack, but he has to put a shield in front of him because the guy is standing up. Kyle urges the guy to hit. The man thinks that he will be able to repel the attack with his shield and hit the guy with his counterattack. Ryoma realizes that he has to aim at this very place. He swings his sword and hits the shield with all his might. From the impact of such force, Kyle was stunned. Ryoma's blow easily broke through his sword. After that, the injured Kyle sank to the ground. He considers this impossible and wonders how Ryoma was able to cut his shield in half only with the help of force. Ryoma explains that he used gravity to compensate for his physique and allowed inertia to rule his blade. Thus, he explained the martial art on Earth. Ryoma admits that this would not have been possible without his sword. Kyle's lips tightened. He could not even think that he would end his life in this place. Although the kingdom of Zarud is literally before his eyes, he considers this outcome to be good luck. Ryoma finds out that the man was overconfident in both his strength and his magic. Kyle admits it. He would never have thought that he would hear such words from anyone else except Mikkel. Ryoma asks if Kyle was the one who framed Mikkel. The guy explains that it was Kyle's mistake that they ended up joining Princess Lupi's. The man did not expect to hear these words. Kyle remembers a moment. He asks the guy if he was really the same low-grade adventurer hired when they accompanied Princess Raiden to Heraklion. The guy agrees. He explains that this is all because they agreed to a task from the guild. In the end, they were probably just forced to agree. The guy says that since there is another man with silver hair with them, they were the perfect replacement for Princess Raiden and the target for Mikkel's attack. No one could have thought that they would be dragged into this story. Kyle is grinning. He realizes that by setting a mousetrap, he has caught a real tiger. Ryoma understands his analogy. He says that he would have ended his life if he hadn't been so lucky. It's pretty simple. Kyle bent his knee. He asks Ryoma to allow him one last wish. The man expresses a desire to end his life as a proud knight and asks Remus to become his opponent, calling him the Devil of Heraklion. The guy agrees. Kyle, gritting his teeth in pain, thanks him and says that now he owes him. Then the guy and the man drew their blades and came together in battle, just as Kyle wanted to die. However, their blades did not touch because someone prevented them. Ryoma was unhappy with this outcome, and he ordered to protect the general and his family. As it turned out, Alina took Kyle's life with one blow. Chris was amazed by such an attack, because Alina took the life of a knight with amplifying magic in the blink of an eye. Now everyone has seen the real power of the White Goddess of War from the Road series. The girl says that everything went as planned. Now all they have to do is grab Harem and take his head off. Alina says that Ryoma has done an excellent job. The girl agrees with her, because Ryoma's plan to leak information into the enemy camp in order to surround them was really amazing. No one would have thought that Ryoma was so good at leading his troops behind him. Everyone was wondering who he really was. Alina thinks that Chris is afraid of him. The girl did not respond to these words. Alina explains that she made a promise to Rama before it all started. Alina promised Rama to return home safely, but she is afraid that she will not be able to fulfill such a promise. Then Chris looked at the woman anxiously. She asks Alina not to talk about something. The girl did not have time to finish, as a subordinate called out to Mrs. Alina. He exclaimed that they had captured Harem, but he also stopped and corrected himself, said that they had captured General Alberg. Alina and Chris looked in his direction. Harem was tied up and the blades were pointed at him. Harem's poor wife and daughter looked anxiously in his direction, not uncoupling each other's hands. Chris ordered a subordinate to remove Harem Alberg's daughter and wife. Harem turns to Chris. He calls her a plebeian imp who was in his squad. He says that her face is still disgusting as well. He wondered where she had gone, even though it wasn't important. He raises his palms and says that now he is giving up. Chris looks at him in disbelief. Harem asks what is the matter because he has the right to be tried by the law since he surrendered. Harem asks to be brought to Princess Lupi's. After all, Gerhardt had set him up after all. Subordinates attacked the man with the words that he had no conscience and shame at all. Alina exhales and says that the man will never change, and this calms her down. Here Alina comes almost close to the man with a gloomy expression on his face. Gerhardt does not recognize her and asks about who she is. Chris screams that she is Mrs. Alina Steiner, and Chris wouldn't let her talk as if the man had forgotten her. Harem asks in perplexity whether Alina should not participate in the march on Heraklion. In the end, Harem notices that time has not spared the woman. He admits that Alina was prettier than any of the maids he could find at the time when they were fighting for the position of general. But she has changed a lot. Harem had heard that crowds of his soldiers had joined Alina in this war. Then he breaks into a scream and says that she is still popular among the trash, throwing a curse word in her direction. Subordinates began to insult the man in response, and Alina asked to put aside all these feuds. She ordered Harem to stand up in an authoritative voice. Harem is angry about this. He irritably asks Alina if she is deaf. The man reminds that he has already given up and asks to be simply exiled from the kingdom or something like that. Chris understands that the man counted on his high birth from the very beginning, and Harem knew that he could prolong his life if he got a fair trial. She wonders how much dirt there is in it. Alina smiles and closes her eyes. She praises General Harem for his amazing determination, which surprises him. Now Alina says that even after General Harem was surrounded, he did not lose his honor and challenged her to a duel. In the end, he died like a true knight. It would be a brave end for someone who has never crossed the code of honor. Alina turns to Chris and looks for confirmation of these words from her as a witness. The girl confirms Alina's words. The man becomes furious and thinks that Alina has gone mad. However, the woman only inserts a sword into the ground at his feet. Alina says that she will lend Harem a sword, and he should accept it as a sign of gratitude for not taking a woman's life back then. Harem asks if Alina will break the law. It is ridiculous for her to think that someone like Harem, who has violated many laws, exploits his social status and origin. Alina does not think that a man like Harem, trampling on his entourage, will turn to the laws of the state in the last moments of his life. Then Alina's voice begins to darken. She asks the man not to worry because she will send his daughter and wife and she will keep him company. However, right after she deals with the man, Chris guessed it, she knew that Alina was planning to end her life. The man screamed convulsively and asked Alina to wait, referring to the mercy of his wife and daughter. However, Alina did not even listen. She took Hadram's life with one blow. His head flew off his shoulders. It seemed that this war was over, and it began to rain in the forest as if washing away all the dirt that had accumulated over the whole story. After that, Alina burst into bitter tears. She realizes that it's over now. He's thinking about his dear Celia right now. After this victory, all the subordinates rush to Alina. She only remembers one young couple. Meanwhile, Hadram's head is lying on the ground. The woman remembers the promise she made to Rama. Alina mentally apologizes to the guy because it seems to her that she will not be able to fulfill the promise she made to him. Alina turns to Chris. The girl explains that they have dealt with Hadram's wife and daughter. She explains that this is a burden that she has to carry herself. Alina looked at the girl dumbfounded. Chris says that Alina has successfully fulfilled her duty. She thanks the woman for not turning away from the true path like Hadram. The Hadram family met its end at the moment when the knights who were chasing them attacked. Chris explains that he was just unlucky, no more and no less. Alina listened to the story. She thinks it's a good thing in that case. Chris and Alina stayed on the battlefield, and the rain poured without interruption on their hair and clothes and on everyone around them. Meanwhile, Princess Lupis and the army have already arrived in the city. However, they were met only by empty streets, where there was not a single soul. Meltina follows the princess. She says that apparently Heraklion has been abandoned, and the only ones left are the mercenaries who did not have time to leave, as well as several people from the administration and a couple of nobles. Melton is confident that they will be able to suppress them fairly quickly and end this civil war. The princess understands everything. Melton considers this a good day because they will be able to do without victims. The princess does not believe in what happened. She doesn't believe that this could really be the end, even though she didn't do anything. With the death of General Hadram Alberg, the leader of the rebel army, the civil war that tore apart the kingdom of Rhodesia for several months is over. This war left only a bitter taste in the mouth of the victors. Festive fanfares are blowing in the streets. Residents look with enthusiasm at the princess who enters the city on horseback. Even the kids are looking at Queen Lupis with enthusiasm. However, the queen herself is not very happy. She was serious. Residents are glad that the war is over. If the civil war had continued, who knows what might have happened. The girl standing next to her heard that the queen was leading the army behind her. She showed exactly why she is called the warlike queen. The residents understand that Meltina will definitely take the position of captain of the royal guard. The residents are glad to know about it. Their country is now under the protection of such a wonderful woman. The cheers don't stop when the residents notice Alina. They say that she defeated the traitor General Kadram and fulfilled the residents' wish. They also notice the beauty of Chris walking next to Alina. Next, Alina is followed by another group of guys. However, with their appearance, the inhabitants quieted down. The eyes of these people darkened and became tense. People will guess who it might be because they look pretty scary. And one of them doesn't have half an arm. People think that these are mercenaries who made a significant contribution to the war. One of the men had heard some rather disturbing rumors about the mercenaries, that their gang included some kind of Heraklion monster that killed 10,000 soldiers in a matter of seconds, who used water magic to kill infantrymen. They started discussing rumors that maybe he was a womanizer and just huge in size. They assume that he can take his life just for looking at him the wrong way. Residents say that it is frightening, and they wonder if the queen really found a place for such a person in the army and whether it is safe at all. Here Ryoma passes by and says that these words are quite offensive. Then the residents turn around in surprise and begin to guess who this big guy who called them is. They looked at the frowning Mikoshiba Ramu and realized that he was the Heraklion demon. Ryoma appeared again in the company of the girl sisters. The man says that he thought he would be a teenager. Quiet days have come. Princess Lupis looks out the window and sadly wonders what they should do now. Meltina says it's a resounding victory. The queen says that Ryoma quickly convinced Baron Bargestan and her Nan to join their kingdom. And he also brought back Alina, who has a huge military experience behind her, which will strengthen their power. As a result, he forced General Hadram to open up, which allowed him to legally take his life and maintain control over the knights. Ryoma was on the river at the right moment and built a fortress before the enemy forces joined forces. In the Battle of the Tebe River, he defeated the superior forces of his rivals, flooding them. And when the army forces stormed Heraklion, he quickly stopped Hadram's attempt to escape the country, simultaneously getting rid of Kyle. Closing her eyes, the queen frowns slightly and says that what Ryoma did is simply incredible. Meltina explains that the guy was able to increase their strength at no cost. After all, he defeated an army of 20,000 with much more modest forces. On top of everything else, he brought them the heads of 2 generals. It was just unheard of. The man says that rumors of a Mikoshiba are spreading throughout their country, and along with fear. He probably doesn't like it, but it's better to be known for something like this than to be completely unknown. If they continue to use him, the demon of Heraklion, then this fact alone will strengthen their position. The princess understands that in this case, many will try to recruit him to their side. The princess understands that as promised he brought them victory. In return, they hired a guild to clear their names. He's a free man now. The princess regrets that they could not punish Vora's involvement. The man says that he has now been detained on suspicion of profiting from post-war conditions, but as a result, he will get out of the country. The man asks about the progress of Meltina's registration as a knight. She explains that they can easily put her as the captain of the squad, but this does not exactly correspond to the level of the reward they deserve. It is better to give her a title with all the honors. However, most commoners and nobles are against honors for Mikoshiba. If Mikkel had been on their side, he would have pacified the opposition, but now he is under house arrest. The princess understands that this will not help them. The man suggests putting Mikoshiba in the place of the Minister of Defense of someone without a background, and this will affect the rest of the empty seats from the war. Besides, Ryoma did not swear allegiance to their state, only to the queen. Even if they could give Mikoshiba something that would keep him within the country, the man doubts that this is even possible. Queen Lupis is not sure if she can keep control of him. The guys looked at her worriedly. The princess realizes that Ryoma has used his strength and charisma to form a small army of mercenaries and even assassins. The princess understands that it is quite convenient when he is on their side. But even if the chance is negligible and he decides to stage a coup, the princess regretfully says that in this case, they will have no way to stop him. The girl does not want to show disrespect, but still expresses her opinion that the guy will not even think about it. The man confirms, but says that anything can happen in the future. There was an awkward silence. Here the girl lowers her eyes and suggests asking Alina to take the life of Ryoma Mikoshiba. Then the princess exclaimed that they couldn't do it. Even if they could, the woman wouldn't agree. The girl confirms that she is really close to Mikoshiba and has his trust. Maybe she can find a way. The princess says it's too risky. There is a chance that she will decide to join Mikoshiba. And this means that they will have 2 powerful enemies, and they will have no choice but to fight them. The man exhales and says that in this case they have no way out. The conversation is interrupted by the maid's apologies. She says that a certain pseudo wants to see the princess. The maid asks if the man should be allowed to enter the room. With a tense expression on her face, Meltina allows him to enter. Pseudo spreads his hands and greets Her Highness with a smile. The girl who was sitting next to me can't believe that a man had the audacity to show up here. The man does not understand and asks what Meltina means. After all, he had expressed his intention to come and congratulate Her Highness on her coronation, and there was nothing wrong with that. Pseudo says that he kept all his promises on the battlefield. Now he wants more trust from the kingdom. Meltina irritably tells him to stop fidgeting. Pseudo understands that, apparently, the queen is worried about something. He doesn't want her lovely face to be disfigured in this way. Here Pseudo, with a serious face, suggests that the princess was considering a plan of action about Mikoshiba Ryoma. Everyone in the room stared at the man seriously. They noticed that Pseudo didn't even raise an eyebrow and hit the bullseye. The man says that they've had quite a lot of trouble since they got together with Ramai. Pseudo explains that they cannot make him a knight any more than they can let him leave the country. But you can't take his life either. Here Meltina jumps up and shouts at Pseudo, ordering him to watch his tongue. The queen immediately subdues her. The man expressed his confidence that such speeches would lead the girl to nothing. The princess understands that if a man has started such a conversation, then he most likely has a plan. The man puts his palms together. He is extremely glad that the queen is very perceptive, and this country will prosper with such a queen. Meltina and the man were not enthusiastic about this flattery. Pseudo in turn says that Ryoma's existence alone is a problem. Even in this case, the princess cannot take hasty action on this matter. but it is possible to restrain him from influencing politics and at the same time keep him in the country by giving him the highest honors of a knight from the noble stratum. The place where all these conditions will be met is within the state. Then Mikoshiba Ryoma was invited to the palace. He and his henchmen have arrived, and now he is kneeling before the queen. Queen Lupi says that in the name of the Rhodium, she grants Mikoshiba the title of Baron, and thus claims that Ryoma will rule over the Wortenia Peninsula. Ryoma and his subordinates were shocked by this and stared dumbfounded at the floor. He looks up at the queen uncertainly. He does not believe that he has become a baron. The people who stood at the ceremony also did not believe that a mercenary would become a baron. The queen tilted her head to the side and said that she had noted Ryoma's prowess during the military operations that had recently taken place. She says that the guy's devotion and actions were higher than expected from a citizen of the Rhodium and were a significant contribution to the formation of the glory of the kingdom. The princess apologized for the delay, urging her to accept what she deserved. Everyone looked on patiently, waiting for Ryoma's answer. Sudo was smiling slyly at this time and glancing at the guy. He thinks that he's a problem for them too, so they need him to stay in his cage for a while. Ryoma frowns and realizes that this queen has caught him. They and their subordinates went to their lands. Leona couldn't even think of it. Ryoma now understands Liu Bang, whom Xiang Yu exiled to rule in Basha. He admits that the queen caught him well. He had to leave the country while they could. However, Ryoma believes that they did much better than with Hanzin. The guy asks his subordinates not to worry about this. The girl smiles and talks about what's wrong with that. After all, Ryoma went from an ordinary mercenary to a noble. Boltz talks about whether he had a way to refuse. Of course, the land is vast, but he has heard bad things about these places. Ryoma explains that he was involved with too many people to just say no and leave. If they had talked to the guild, then he wouldn't have been able to take any assignments. Everything they had done to escape from Ultomia would have gone to waste. And in the end, the guy just didn't want to lose face. Here Alina sincerely thanks him. She says it's time for something. The woman pulls the sword out of its scabbard and says that in this case she must fulfill her promise. Then the girls panicked because they don't know what happened and why they froze in such poses. Ryoma explains that Alina promised him to come together in battle when the war is over. Alina grins and regrets that the battle will not take place on horseback. Ryoma grins because he doesn't know how to saddle horses. Alina believes that he should learn since he is now one of the noble people. Ryoma points out that he didn't ask for it, so if he loses, he will ask Alina to take care of him. Alina and Rama unsheathed their blades, getting into fighting positions. Alina analyzes this situation. Alina notices that Ryoma got into that very fire stance. Suddenly Alina chuckles and then with a slight smile tells Rama to forget about it. The guy is at a loss because the woman promised him a fight. She pretends to grab her head and falls down saying that she lost. Ryoma is surprised by what Alina is doing and he calls out to her. The woman asks him to stop it already. She explains that it was all just a ploy to make sure she didn't end her life. She asks the guy for confirmation of her words. Ryoma approaches Alina to help her stand up. The woman guesses that sometimes a guy doesn't think through his actions. Ryoma says that he was really interested in Alina as a valiant warrior. Alina says that you need to protect your elders. Ryoma objects and says that she is still young. Alina thanks for the compliment. She asks Ramu about his age. The guy is 16 years old. After that, she pushes the guy back. Here he finds out the reason for Alina's action. She asks him not to worry and let her steal it for a minute. Here the girls approach her anxiously and ask her not to be hasty. And Alina says that everything is fine. Here she begins her conversation. It turns out that Alina had a dream to hold her child in her arms and show him the world she protects. Alina says that she was so gentle. Ryoma didn't think he was young enough to be a child. However, he has an idea. He apologizes to the woman in advance and takes her hand. Alina looks at him in surprise. He abruptly puts her on his neck. He says with a smile that if his parents were here, he would like to fulfill their dream. Alina calmly looks at the guy. He understands that he has won. Alina says that these lands will be, and it doesn't matter what obstacles stand in the way of Ramai. He will overcome them anyway, and she believes in it. Here, Alina points confidently with her hand forward. All the guys come to the cliff to inspect their lands. She urges Ryoma, calling him her son, to go forward. The guy understands the instruction. One of the policemen thinks that if they are not at home, then everything is useless. Then his colleague said that he intended to come until it had an effect. He suggests his Kyusuda just shut up and follow him. Then Kyusuda was surprised that his colleague thinks that the missing kid is how you are connected with that event. After all, those people were pretty good at cooperating during the interrogation. Kyusuda doesn't think the family is involved in anything. Takabana is determined to start an investigation and repeat it until they succeed. He reads what happened beyond suspicion, because it doesn't leave a trace and just evaporates, as if being transported to another world seems very strange. Meanwhile, on the Wortenia Peninsula, being a technical part of the Kingdom of Ryoma, it is a place where criminals are exiled. As a result, there are almost no civilians here. These are untamed lands in which half-demon monsters act as they please, and pirates are robbing the coast. This is a distortion. The girl thinks they got rid of them quite successfully. Sato agrees with her. He thinks they would have gotten them into trouble anyway. The girl could not even think that the guys were involved in the Civil War of the Road series. She thinks about what advantage they could have had from this. Everyone in the room was thinking about the criminal who had done away with Gies Valkland, the head of the Royal Magician's Lodge. Sudo intends to start over. Sudo is thinking about the kingdom of Meist, Ryoma, and Zaryuta. He realizes that this was Guy's plan, to worsen the relationship of these three weak kingdoms and invade them while they were busy with each other was the man's true goal. Sudo says that they had to absorb these three kingdoms, while maintaining the balance of power with Ernescula in the north and Cultania in the west. This was the only scenario in which the Ultomi Empire would take over the world. Sato notices that this demon not only dealt with Gies, but also destroyed all their original plans. He considers the guy to be the main thorn in their affairs. The man with the grin says that the guy clearly dislikes the demon. After a couple of moments, Sudo asks not to get upset so much. If he almost lost that doll that he put so much time and effort into to grow it. The girl lowered her eyes. She says that, starting with the poisoning of the previous king of the Rhodesia and ending with the beginning of the battle for the right of succession, events were going well. She thinks it's good that they didn't figure out who was behind it. The girl is shocked that the guy then agreed to this link to Armenia. It looks, of course, like a promotion, but obviously in order to get him out of the way. Sudo finds the demon an entertaining character. At the last minute, the guy added requirements so that the deal would take place slightly. Here the man immediately remembers the demon, who was immensely happy, and where he asked for about 1,000,000 gold coins. Ryoma promised to refine these lands so that no one would be disappointed. He would appreciate it if Sudo would pay off such an investment. Sato's boyfriend asked him to forgive him. The girl awkwardly muttered that she considered this situation absurd, because Ryoma had asked for the entire income of the Road series, and even they would not be able to pay that much. Sudo believes that making an outrageous demand to embarrass the person with whom you are conducting sentences, and then making it look like he is returning to a more reasonable offer, which was your intention, is considered a good tactic. The first of them is that Mikoshiba will have absolute power over the laws, the military, international politics, and the economy in the kingdom. Secondly, he will be exempt from taxes paid by the nobility of the kingdom. Sudo said that in addition to all this, Ryoma was also awarded 5,000 gold as an investment. Sato adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose and thought that it was just incredible, because these 5,000 gold pieces are almost 500 million yen. The girl was interested in whether Princess Lupis had agreed to such brazen and unfavorable conditions. Sato smiles and nods his head in response, confirming her assumptions. The girl thought it was stupid. After all, she believes that even the title of Baron was a generous reward for him. If the princess agreed to the terms, then he is considered a duke. And the princess, in fact, gave Wortenia the status of a principality. Sato thinks that Ryoma really has a talent for deceiving people, and he has clearly engendered a sense of guilt in Princess Lupis for not fulfilling his initial demands. Sudo said that the queen is a kind woman. The girl thinks the princess is stupid because she allowed a poisonous snake to live in her backyard. She then turns to Sudo and asks him if this snake will come back to bite them. Sudo explains that these were talons of lawlessness in which it is impossible to collect taxes. Even Mikoshiba, despite his talents, cannot make significant progress in a few years, and the Ryoma won't be able to send Zarud's reinforcements. Sudo says that there is a chance here. When he says this, the girl's expression becomes more serious. She suddenly grinned and said that in that case, as they had planned, the Ultomi Empire would invade Zarud. Alina looks out the window. Birds are flying high in the sky, they are on their way. A couple of light feathers fall off them, which fly serenely past the windows. Here Chris suggests that Alina is worried about a miscarriage. Chris says that Mikoshiba has not been in the capital for a month. She assumes that if everything went well, then he should be in the fortress of Epillos, the gates of Wortenia. Alina chuckles and says that Chris's words sound right. Chris notices that Alina regrets that she couldn't stop Ryoma Mikoshiba. Alina says that, after all, it was Her Majesty's decision, and the woman simply has to respect it. All Alina can do now is protect the queen and do everything in her power to protect the world. Chris talks about how she heard that Her Majesty is planning to end Mikkel's house arrest. Alina understands that Queen Lupis is still worried. After all, she still has no confidants whom she could fully trust. Alina says that Chris doesn't have to say anything more because what was said was already enough. Eventually, Raiden was dragged into the royal couple. Gerhardt was demoted from Duke to Viscount. Everything seems to have settled down, but Alina still feels anxious. Alina suddenly realizes that she doesn't feel the situation is improving. Maybe things are getting even worse. The woman is abruptly overcome by a feeling of panic and anxiety. Chris notices the woman's agitation. She understands that when he sees Wortenia with his own eyes, Mikoshiba will hate them. Chris begins to think that the queen has made an enemy of herself. Alina, hearing these words, began to laugh. To her, it sounds like there's going to be some fun. If this turns out to be true, then she will intend to deal with Mikoshiba. Alina thought for a moment. She understands that this will happen if they ever see the guy again. The woman really hopes for this. A loud sneeze is heard. The girl turns back and asks Ramai what's the matter. She thinks the guy has a cold. The girl asks to hold out a little longer because after the ridge they will already be in a pillows. The real evil comes from Mikoshiba, and he is full of hatred. He raises his head and with tears in his eyes says that his body hurts. The girl, bursting into laughter, slaps the guy on the back, saying that he can no longer say such things because now he has the status of a baron. The girl jokes that the family coat of arms of Ramai in this case will be defamed by his own words. Another girl confirms her companion's words. She explains that the sword means strength and snakes mean cunning and knowledge. She believes that such a coat of arms can be considered the complete embodiment of Ramai. The girl, who as it turned out was quite strict about these changes, threatened with her finger and asked the guy to straighten up and behave appropriately. Ryoma dejectedly agreed. Then her eyes immediately sparkled. She said that in exchange, she promises to apply a special ointment to Ryoma's body when they all get to the tavern. Immediately, the second girl objected that her friend could not so easily take the master's body for herself. Here the man thinks that Ramai should have gone in a carriage. The guy objected and considered it wrong in relation to all those red lions that obediently follow him into such a wasteland. They arrived at the fortress. This fortress is the nearest town to the Wortenia Peninsula. Ryoma believes that they should get all the necessary information about the situation in this place. Ryoma decides to take a little rest and get ready. Then the girl joyfully and enthusiastically asked the man if they could take a bath. And of course he gave permission. The girls were sincerely glad that they would finally take a bath. And at that time Ryoma was amazed at the size of these walls near the fortress. After all, this is a border town, so they just need strong walls. It looked like they were protecting themselves from more than just Zarud. The guy understands that people need to defend themselves from the monster from the peninsula. The man agrees and says that he is also known as the lid of the infernal cauldron. Ryoma realizes that apparently the persecution is even more severe than they imagined. They arrived at the fortress city of Epillos. It is the stronghold of the northwestern border of the kingdom of Ridsyria. The girls are finally taking a bath because they have been waiting for this moment for so long. The heat from the water penetrates into their bodies, warming every cell. In the city, people walk along the narrow streets. Meanwhile, the guys sat down at the table to have a snack. Ryoma is unhappy again and considers this situation not the best for him and his subordinates. They have 30 people in total, including all the red lions. The guy thinks that it will be simply unrealistic to rule these backward lands. The girl thinks that maybe they should have brought those mercenaries who fought with them in the war. She remembers that they all went their separate ways after the end of the war. Ryoma believes that this is the right thing to do, because he wants to leave some of the allies on the mainland. Besides, the guys can't rely on the fighters alone. Ryoma wants people who can generate and accumulate knowledge. The guy also wants to explore the land, purchase equipment, and establish a trade route for food supplies. Her sister says that in that case they could inspect the markets for traders. Ryoma agrees and asks the sisters to be more careful in their choice. The man expressed his intention to go to the Adventurers Guild in order to try to find out something about the theft. Ryoma nods approvingly. The guy asks Jean to find out everything about everyone who has power in the city. The guy considers it necessary to find out about their families, personalities, their weaknesses, strengths, and everything else. Jen understands that this information is really necessary in order to gain allies in this city. Jean thinks he should exceed Ryoma's expectations, and the girl is going to look for bodyguards. Ryoma instructs the girl that she has to find 200 of the best fighters, but she also has to take into account that they only have a one-year contract. He asks them to give them instructions that in the end, the fighters will be able to become full-fledged knights. Ryoma is a little upset that they won't have any income for a while, so that limits them. The girl asks what Ryoma will be doing at this time. Ryoma thinks that he will try to meet with the city manager, Count Salzburg. Ryoma is not sure that the Count will meet him, but the guy, at least, is determined to at least try his luck, since they will have to deal with him in the future. Ryoma explains that the whole point is that the Count will most likely not like the fact that a nobleman with a lower rank will pass through the city and will not deign to bow to him. The girl notices that it sounds like the Count is too proud. Here, the Jean, full of seriousness, says that in order to find out if this Graf is worth trust, it is necessary to meet with him personally. The guy confirms the man's words. Ryoma offers to take a break from business and take a little rest. He counts on the guys. Ryoma waved goodbye to the girls who were going to rest. He turns to the man and asks if he is here. Jean agrees. Ryoma asks the man why he decided to follow them. Ryoma thinks he deserves the right to know about it. Jean closes his eyes. The guy explains that he just wants to end all these trials of each other. The guy says that everything is fine, and he is sure that the Jean has its own reasons. As Ryoma said, there is a job that the guy wants to hire the Gen clan for. The guy asks the man if the members of his clan are free now. The man says that his people are free now. Terrible thoughts flash through his mind. As it turned out, he was right, and Ryoma wants to get rid of someone big. He asks the man for the price of these services. The man frowned. He says that money will not be a necessity, but in exchange they will have one request. Then the guy was immediately delighted. He considers it an exchange of pleasantries. He invited the man to discuss the details. Jean thinks the guy is a pretty interesting person. However, he also thinks that he is an impudent person. The Jean is created by the question of how the guy achieved all this. The day has come. At this time, the police are all trying to achieve at least some results. Asuka is standing in the kitchen and wiping the dishes. She notices that the investigators and her grandfather have been talking for quite a long time. She wonders if they'll find out anything. After all, it has been more than 6 months since Ryoma disappeared. She wanted to indulge in her feelings, but suddenly she heard her name. As it turned out, her grandfather was calling her. The man asked the police to escort the gentleman to the door. The girl agreed. The police apologized to the man for interrupting his training. They also thanked the man for his cooperation. Grandpa looked down and said that everything was fine. Then Asuka asked the police to go to the exit. One of them noticed that she was quite cute, and now the police are already walking down the corridor. Then one of them turns to Takabana. He says that the old man is annoyed with the police, so it's time for them to stop interrogating him. Kyusuda says that it is generally difficult to position as a crime. Tachibana, in a dissatisfied tone, reminds his partner that only he thinks so. Tachibana thinks that old man is definitely unusual. Kyusuda responds by noting that the old man is quite calm for a man who has lost a grandson. However, the partner says that's not the point at all. Tachibana says that the man is insanely similar to the criminal he met in Hong Kong, because the feelings were exactly the same. Kyusuda does not want to hear this story, which a colleague has already told many times, and he just said that Kyusuda was too stupid. Then Asuka turned to the police. At this time, the old man was already resting in his room. Memories of his son's last request for the old man to take care of Ramai appear in his head. Suddenly, the old man notices that the drink in his cup begins to shake and ripple. He thought it might be because of some bug. Then the old man's attention is attracted by his katanas, which seem to tremble. As it turned out, the katanas, Oka and Kikyuka, are crying. The old man understands that the katanas are telling him to take them. The old man looks dumbfounded to the side and then runs out into the corridor. He doesn't feel the presence of the police and Asuka at all. He did not think that such a thing could happen. The man takes the katanas and runs out of the room. He remembers these vibrations. They are the same as when he was sucked in. The old man immediately had a terrible guess in his head that they also wanted to take Asuka away from him. He believes that this may be his punishment. When the old man was transported to that world, he did everything he could. He fought and then was able to return home only thanks to a miracle. After countless sacrifices and miracles, he was unable to find any of his former comrades in arms. They were left in that world. A few decades later, the old man lost his son and his wife. There is a Rama, and he most likely did not run away but was transferred to that world. And now they're trying to take ICQ away from the old man. The man had the most terrible feeling of fear. When they took his son away, the old man taught Ryoma everything in the martial art that he could. So if the guy had ever been swallowed up by that world, he would definitely have been able to survive there. But in the opinion of the old man, Asuka is completely different. She was a very ordinary girl whom he did not prepare for anything, unlike Ryoma. The old man mentally turns to his sister and asks her to forgive her useless brother. The old man undertakes to protect her daughter no matter what. He only wants Asuka to wait for him.